is our public comment period. At a regular meeting of the Board of Trustees, the public may comment on items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the governing board. For items on the agenda, the public may comment at the time the board considers that agenda item. For items not on the agenda, the public may comment under item 6A, public comment. The Board of Trustees requests that individuals who would like to address the Board of Trustees on an item do so by filling out a request to address the OUSD School Board card and turning it into the superintendent prior to the agenda item. Cards are available at the meeting. Comments are limited to not more than 3 minutes. Groups are asked to limit their comments to a total of 5 minutes. The board shall limit the total time of public comment to 20 minutes. To comply with the Brown Act, the board may listen to comments from the speakers but can neither discuss nor take action on the issues presented. I know we have a number of people here tonight who wish to speak about our item on our agenda 8A about the nature area. And although I know it's inconvenient to have to wait for that item to come up on our agenda, it's important that we do so because that is a discussion item. And by having the comments at the time of the discussion, we will be able to have a full and fair discussion of the issues presented. So I apologize for the inconvenience, but all of those speakers will be called on to speak at the time of that action discussion item 8A. So at this time, Superintendent Glidmy, are there any comment cards on items that are not on our agenda?
There are no comment cards for public comment.
Thank you. Item 7A, our 2022-2023 annual report of the Parcel Tax Independent Citizens Oversight Committee.
Yes, we actually have two presenters here. We have Carl. Oh, just Carl. Okay, you got it. I got the signal that only one presenter will be here. And Carl Richtenberg.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Wait, I know you guys want to talk about Wagner Ranch. I'm with you.
Okay, can I just introduce what you do?
Sure.
Okay, Carl is part of our Parcel Tax Oversight Committee as the Citizens Oversight Committee, and the committee actually meets regularly to oversee that we spend our parcel tax dollars in accordance to the language of the parcel tax ballot. So go ahead.
So dear members of the board, the trustees of Orinda Union School District, on behalf of the Measure A&B Citizens Oversight Committee, I'm pleased to report on the committee findings as required by the ballot measure and committee bylaws. We have reviewed the annual district budget as it relates to Measure A&B and examined efforts by the school district to carefully utilize parcel tax revenues. After consideration, the committee has concluded that the proceeds from Measure A&B have been spent in accordance with the ballot language on both measures. What we did, when we examined the revenue side, which is it on? Yeah, it's fine. We looked at the number of parcels, the taxes that came in, and examined the totals, which you can see there in the presentation on our revenues. We also looked at the expense side of things. Just to put it in a nutshell, we looked at the budget, how much we spent on salaries and benefits, and also the audit reports, and what were the findings. And finally, we looked at some important KPIs, which I think will go one more, Mika, if you can, please. There we go. The KPIs that we look at, first is a class size. How much of a class size reduction do we accomplish by paying more to improve the quality of education for our kids? And as you can see, with measures A and B only, we've had to achieve a 23% class size reduction. It was 28% several years ago, and this is due to the inflation costs, which everybody's aware of, only on higher salaries and benefits. And for those who are not aware, the parcel tax is static, it's flat, so it doesn't change every year. There's no inflation component. So the amount of money that comes in stays flat, and the amount of expenses goes up because there's an inflation component to the salaries and benefits. Go to the next slide. Yes, so on the other KPIs we look at, I'm just going to mention one more before we go to the final slides. We also looked at salaries and benefits as a percentage of total expenses within the district. 2 years ago, it was about 77%, based on not the final results, but the preliminary budget. This is not in here. This is not in here.
Okay.
Yeah, I think separately. Yeah, sorry. It increased to 78%, and then last year it was up to 82%. So what that says is more money is being spent on salaries and benefits. 80% of every dollar that they take in is being spent, which is more and more every year, which gives us the comfort to say that the money is being spent for what it's meant to be, as opposed to if it was, for example, going down and administrative costs or something else was going up, and we'd be like, where's the money going? So we're very comfortable saying that. So we look at, if you just go back to the green one,
Sure.
we look at the scores, some of the other KPIs, one more, sorry, Mika. Yeah, there we go. You can see our English scores, thanks to the efforts of all the teachers in the schools and administrators. Our English scores are fantastic. They've come back to pre-COVID levels. And if we go to the next one, math is almost back to pre-COVID levels, is recovering. I don't know if you're all aware of this, but from what I can tell, and that tells us this is not the case for a lot of other districts. They are still struggling from the after effects of COVID. We have pretty much almost gone completely improved from that. And we go to the next one. This is a California statewide performance dashboard where they benchmark schools against each other. We obviously rank very high. And then we go to the last one, compared to other school districts. And thank you, Ida, for preparing this. This is not an easy slide to prepare because you have to go district by district, but our class sizes, as you can see, are smaller than almost everybody else in our competing areas. So this is the result of your tax dollars and good allocation on behalf of the administrators. Yeah. So that's it. This will be the last measure A and B committee report. The next report will be measure A, B, and Z, which will take it on a whole new nature, but will be done in all one.
Great.
So if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I will stand down for the next time.
Do any board members have any questions?
Just thank you for this report. I really like how you presented this and put together, all the pieces that the parcel taxes touch, and really how it impacts our district. So I just appreciate that. And the Measure Z was one of my questions, but you answered that in the last.
Yeah, we can't, it's just only measure B, so we can't talk about it. I would
Yeah.
love to, but we'll save it for next time. Thank you for everybody doing a great job keeping the school district great. Thank you very much.
Do you have a question?
It was a very tactical question.
Oh,
you
I'm
want
sorry, I'm sorry.
I just noticed on like the parcel tax exempted slide, I guess
Good.
like that amount is
I was
actually,
wondering if someone would notice that.
it's actually going down. Yeah. Is that just because
So
people
if
who
you
are
look
selling
at
it?
the expense- if you look at the expense slide, there is a $10,000 other that goes on top, as you can see this year. That was a consultant that was hired by the school district to go and take a look and make sure that the county was doing a good job making sure that people who have parcels are paying the correct amounts. And they found some cases where people who should have been paying more because there was a transaction weren't, or
Like
other people
turnover
that just lagged.
homes,
Yeah, people
data
turnover. So that cost $10,000, but it resulted in $40,000 of additional parcel tax revenue. So in terms of return on investment, it's a great one. It's not a recurring thing.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a one-time adjustment, for, however many years until we get enough turnover that, the district superintendent decides.
Yeah, so initially it was a little bit higher just because it also included notifications for Measure Z. But there will be some ongoing, just not this much ongoing, because we do believe that it's a good investment to have a professional data company examining turnover of homes at each sale, as opposed to doing it internally, because you do recoup more money on exemptions versus for the investment. Yeah.
Thank you.
So money well spent.
Great,
Thank you.
great.
All right.
Any
Thank
you.
other questions, board members?
Just, are there any other inhibitors you think besides that one that we could potentially face that you learned from measures A and B?
Well, yes. If we could pass a parcel tax that increased in line with COLA, it would solve a lot of our problems. Because the vast majority of the struggle or the conflict, or whatever you want to call it, is the flat nature of the income and the rising expense ratio. So every so many years, when that gap gets too much and we start digging into reserves or having to increase class sizes or cut programs, then a new measure is required. And it becomes a vote and well, I'm not going to go into that, but it just becomes very difficult. So just from a practical standpoint, in the future, if there were measures aligned with inflation, that would solve that problem, I believe. And then it would just be a question of how many parcels, how many students.
And we did poll on that question when we went out for Measure Z.
It
And it's
didn't
not
go
very
over well.
popular.
It's not very popular.
Yeah, it was electable.
I have a question, but just a comment that I appreciate the slides on the impact on class size. So thank you, Aida, for supplying that information. But my immediate thought was thank you to the community for that support. That's amazing. That's a gigantic impact on students to be able to have smaller classes like that. And I know the teachers appreciate that as well. But those jumped out at me, and that's really awesome. And obviously not the case for most of the rest of California.
No, it's not. And I gotta tell you, the school district makes the town. I believe in it firm. That's why I'm doing this. Yeah, good schools make this place. That's what it is.
That's true.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Carl. Just on behalf of staff, it's really easy. The committee makes it easy for us. We just provide the numbers. Mika does all the numbers. I can do the data, but they really just tell us, this is how we want to visualize it. Here's what we want to do. Here's what we want to follow. They make it really easy for us.
Thank you.
And yeah, thank you. I did such a great job. The bounce back from COVID is just amazing.
Yes.
So thank you so much.
Thank you. I have no public comment on this item, so if anyone would like to make a measure to accept the report of the Measure A and B parcel tax, the annual report for 22-23.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ed.
This is Ed. I recommend that the board accept the Measures A and B parcel tax annual report for 22-23.
Is there a second?
I'll second. This is Hillary.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Any opposition? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we'll have the 22-23 Citizens Bond Oversight Committee for the annual report for Measures E and I.
So same job, way more complicated dollars, just because every project is very different.
Thank you, Brad.
So Brad McCullough is going to present. I know you don't have a partner. Oh,
Yeah,
you do,
so,
Michael. Oh, two partners right there. I'm sorry. We have Michael, who had just joined the committee this year, and your vice chair, Juan Kelly, right there,
Thank you, Juan.
who you have probably seen here as an expert on actuarials in the past. So these three gentlemen have spent a lot of subcommittee time. They actually have an office upstairs. My office subs as their office as well. So a lot of time to really make sure that we spend our dollars. And I say it's complicated because the projects are so different and it ranges from little dollars to really big dollars, but they go through all of it to prepare this report. So I'll let you go for it. Just tell me how do you want me to project?
I'm not going to go through the whole document. I might pull up a couple of the different charts. But first of all, I wanted to thank Ida and staff, Mika, and for supplying us the information we need and helping us do our job, basically. And thank you to the board for selecting our members of our committee, because that really helps. And I think we're going to have a little bit more turnover this year and get some new members as well. So basically what we do is we look at the expenditures, all the projects that are being done with that money, making sure that the projects are in line with the Measure E and Measure I writing, what those measures were passed for. We're looking at the bond money, making sure that it's in some cases in very low level of detail as to what is being spent on, make sure it's being spent on the right types of things. We look at the audit report, that's an external audit report, and match that with what we're finding. They do an in-depth analysis of expenses. They go through a lot of expenses and actually almost half of the expenses incurred, making sure that they're matching with Measure E and I. And we look at that and make sure everything looks good, which it does. And then we put together this report. And in this report, what we're trying to do is that this report is intended for the public, and making sure that the public has the information they need to be able to look at this and say, okay, yeah, I feel comfortable that my Measure E and I funds, which is $105 million worth of bonds. So it's a large amount, and make sure that that's being spent appropriately. So that's what our small group does. In this latest year, so this is the July 22 to June 2023 audit report. So it's almost a year old right now, but so this was the money back then. So in summary, all the bonds that have now been issued, so there's $105 million worth of bonds that were issued over the period of the few years we did this. This year, we added additional charts for the public to help with understanding kind of where this money was spent. So if we go down to the first chart, okay, this is just a financial chart of what was going on this year. This year was about $33 million worth of expenses. And so keep going down. So this is an explanation where those were. You can see the chart here of the expenses over time. You can see there's a sharp rise as we look into this next audit report. It's going to be an even sharper rise because a lot more has been spent. The budget has been, the original budget was approved, but there was no escalation or soft costs involved in that. So the board redid the budget, and I think there's been 2 or 3 other iterations since then. But as of right now, this is so it shows the budget over time. Keep going. So this is expenses against the budget, and you can see the percentages spent against the budget. Again, this coming year is going to be a large increase. So then, here's the cost progression by the different types of projects. So we have the MPR, the modernization project, which is just getting started, the HVAC and all the campuses, the OIS services, student services building, and then some non-project specific items. Those.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's good. So this year, we also put in vendor payments because we thought it would be interesting to see who we're paying and what type of work they're doing. And if you look at it, actually, if you scroll up just slightly, sorry, no.
The other one?
The other, yeah. No, to the words between the 2 charts.
Okay.
There we go, yeah. So 90% of the spend is with 6 vendors, 4 of them construction, 1 of them project management, 1 of them is the state architect. So you can see that most of the money is being spent in direct construction costs. Very little is not. Okay, keep going. And so this is another chart that we added, which is expenses by site, just to show, again, mainly for the public, to show where are we spending? Is it, how much per the sites? The big change here is that the MPR is added into the Sleepy Hollow numbers. Otherwise, all of them are about 3.5 million, 3.6 million on the HVAC. And then Sleepy Hollow MPR is added to that. I did have an error here that I need to fix. It says spend at OIS was 14.1. It's actually 4.3. So we do need to fix that.
Okay.
So that's another new chart. And then at the end of the report, we just quote what the outside auditor has to say. And that's my summary of it. And then, Juan, did you want to?
Yeah, just briefly. What drives our work is the audit report. And I have many good things to say about the audit report and one bad thing. And the good things are they looked at 50% expenses, almost 18 million, and they found no instances in which money was spent contrary to the ballot measures. And in our discussions with the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, it was rather humorous. The point was made, well, why don't we have them look at 100% of the expenses? And then some wiseacre said, but then it wouldn't be an audit. And so I was honored to work with these 2 brilliant gentlemen whose expertise with Excel far exceeds mine. And rumor has it, our duties will be completed before June 30th, 2026. Can't promise that, but that's the rumor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any board members have questions?
And you may have answered this, so I'm sorry, because I was looking at the slides and listening. What falls under the non-project specific dollars?
So there's project general type things. So So the
I think it was like project
Roland.
management. like
Yeah,
Roland,
Roland,
like
project
Winterton.
They're not
Yes.
allocated, they're just.
Right, so
just-
they're managing our
The
project.
whole thing.
The whole thing.
some of the early expenses like that, some of the, and some of the ongoing expenses.
Okay, thank you.
I had the same question about the non-site specific.
It's-
I guess it's the same thing.
Same.
Yeah.
Right.
Some initial soft costs and like designing when the bond was initially passed and so on is what we were looking at.
Do you think there are any proactive strategies we can use to mitigate the increase of soft costs
Mm.
for future projects and as you continue on?
Yes, well, so the original, so I guess two pieces of that. One is the original estimates were done without soft cost or escalation. That was, I think everybody realizes that was a mistake but that was a big change in the cost dynamics for the project. As far as looking at soft costs, so we don't get into the intimate operations of the project. That's Ada and Stuart do that. And so we don't get into that level of detail to identify areas where some of these soft costs might be reduced or. Sure.
So Eve and I have served on the bond executive team, and really that's our job, is to look at
Right.
all of those soft costs and everything. The oversight committee's job is to make sure that we're spending the money in accordance with the language of the ballot measures that were passed. And it's been very exciting this year. We opened school for the first time with HVAC working in every classroom. So our students had air filters and cooling and heat all winter, and not without a few hiccups. And thank you to Stuart and his team for getting everything really fine-tuned. But to open the new OIS building and the new multipurpose room, I mean, we're really finally, it's taken time. We're finally seeing some real movement in what we can accomplish with these dollars, and it's exciting. So
It's great to see new buildings on some of these
isn't it? It's
campuses.
been over 25 years since we've opened new buildings on our campuses. So that's been a really, really big thing. And it takes a whole team. I mean, we all have our roles and responsibilities, and I truly appreciate the work you put in to make sure that the money that the citizens have given us for these specific purposes are being spent that way. So thank you. And thank you for the service to the district. It's much appreciated.
Thank you.
So I see no public comment on this item, so I'd like to request a motion that the board accept the 2023 Citizens Bond Oversight Committee Annual Report.
This is Hillary. I move that the board accept the 2022-23 Citizens Bond Oversight Committee Annual Report.
Katie, I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Great, thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much.
Now we're on to item C, Resolution 2423, recognizing and honoring Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month.
Okay. So in front of you, you have a resolution that we are hoping that you will read. The district has prepared. This is something that we have been bringing to you annually, and it is a resolution recognizing and honoring Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, which is May 2024.
Great. And maybe before we do that, we could have a short discussion about this practice we have of these months recognizing and honoring different groups of people in our community. This is also Jewish American Heritage Month, and for whatever reason, that's not being honored here tonight. And my concern has been and continues to be, we need to have some sort of calendar or schedule or some way of making sure that by honoring one group, we're not excluding inadvertently a different group. And it's very hard because there are lots of diversity in our community. That's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And we want to make sure everyone is part of our community. But I wanted to raise that point before we read the resolution, not to take anything away from the importance of this resolution, but for us to just consider what we can do going forward as a district so we don't have those kinds of omissions and inadvertently upsetting other groups by honoring one group.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. We've talked about it in the past, putting together some sort of calendar about, what resolutions we're going to bring throughout the course of the year. And I think it would be helpful to maybe have something like that in August when the school year starts, just kind of laying that out, and then that can be presented to the board.
Yeah, can do that.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Now, let's read resolution number 24-23. Etta, would you like to start for us?
Sure.
Whereas in 1990, Congress voted to expand Asian Pacific heritage from a week to a month-long celebration of the significant contributions of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders to the history of the United States. And in May 1992, the month of May was permanently designated as Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. And
Whereas the state of California is home to more than 600,000 students of Asian and Pacific Islander descent, transitional kindergarten through grade 12. And
Whereas understanding Asian and Pacific Islander history is an important part of celebrating Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And
Whereas, despite the hardships and barriers of the past, the people of Asia and the Pacific Islands who come to this country and their descendants have made substantial contributions to California's economic growth and development and have woven clear, distinct threads into the state's social fabric. And
Whereas even in the face of recent violence and prejudice, Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders continue to demonstrate strength, resiliency, and advocacy for inclusion and nonviolence. And
whereas the California State Board of Education recognizes in its policy statement on multicultural education that each student needs an opportunity to understand the common humanity underlying all people, to develop pride in their own identity and heritage, and to understand, respect, and accept the identity and heritage of others. And
whereas Asian Pacific Heritage Month is celebrated annually at the local, state, and national levels. And
whereas the Asian American and Pacific Islander community is an inherently diverse population composed of more than 45 distinct ethnicities and more than 100 language dialects. And
whereas in the Orinda Union School District, 20% of the student population identify as Asian, Filipino, or Pacific Islander. And
now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Trustees of the Orinda Union School District that May 2024 is designated as Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month and encourages all schools to commemorate this occasion with appropriate instructional materials. Would someone like to make a motion? Or is there any public comment on
there's
this
no
item?
public comment.
And
I move
It's a
that,
roll call.
It's a roll call.
But
Is,
we'll still need a motion.
yeah, I move that we adopt the resolution number 2423, Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, May 2024.
This is Eve, I second it.
Trustee Weiner? Aye. Trustee Sheridan?
Aye.
Trustee Phillips? Aye. Vice President Collins Coleman?
Aye.
President Hoxie?
aye.
Motion carries.
Great,
so
thank you. Thank you for bringing this to us.
Yes.
It's just always a challenge to get everything. All right. On to the revised salary schedules for certificated management, classified management, unrepresented, and confidential employee groups. Dr. Inglesby.
All right, thank you, President Hoxie. What you have before you is a proposal to adjust the current salary schedules for active non-represented employee groups, specifically certificated management, classified management, unrepresented, which includes psychologists, program specialists, or behaviorists, and before and after school care employees, and our confidential staff. The document also includes the signature of the Contra Costa County Office of Education, who has reviewed the district's AB 1200 disclosure documents and concurs that the district certification and that the district can afford the 23-24 salary and benefit increases for our non-represented employee groups. And we're looking for approval that the board approve the revised salary schedules.
Great. Any board members have any questions about this item? Is there any public comment on this item?
There's no public comment.
Great. Would someone like to make a motion that we approve the revised salary schedules for certificated management, classified management, unrepresented, confidential, and basket employee groups?
Hillary, I move that we approve the revised salary schedules for certificated management, classified management, unrepresented, and confidential employee.
Doesn't roll off the tongue. Is there-
Katie, I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, the motion carries, and thank everybody for the work to put this all together.
Yes, thank you for your support on this. This also helps us with retention and recruitment. And also thank you to business office staff and HR for putting this together. It's a lot of work
Right,
to adjust all these salaries. So we really appreciate that.
we do. All right. Next, the declaration of need for fully qualified educators. I recall this is an annual item.
Thank you, President Hoxie. This is the declaration of need for a fully qualified educator. The Commission on Teacher Credentialing requires that any teacher who doesn't have a clear credential, so they're in the process of clearing their credential, be allowed to teach in a specific subject area. And you can see from the attached supporting documents that we're looking for support in the area of multiple subjects, single subject, and special education, as well as teachers who are in the process of clearing their certificate of language acquisition support for students or English learners. And we have, currently, we've been able to hire teachers. We have a small group, as we know, we have a small group retiring. So there's an incoming teacher group. We've been able to pretty much have teachers who are, this won't be affecting. However, we have mid-year, we may have retirees coming forth current month. So if we have a need, we'll be able to fulfill that need with the commissioner teacher credential.
Any questions?
I remember this coming forward last year. This just allows flexibility if needed.
Flexibility, yes. We can hire intern teachers if we need to. For mid-year, someone's completing a credential, we could have an intern teacher step into it. That's true.
And if things really change, we need more than what's allocated here.
We would come back to you. And this is just as a global estimate, and we're in pretty good shape and have really front-loaded it for success this year.
And there's no public comment on this item.
Public comment.
So would someone like to make a motion?
Hillary, I'll move that we approve the declaration of need for fully qualified educators.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, the motion carries. And next we have the substitute annual statement of need.
Yes, in a similar vein, the governor and legislature have authorized a waiver of the basic educational skills tests for any incoming substitute, which expires at the end of this year. They haven't renewed it ongoing, so we're putting this forward to be able to enable us to hire substitutes immediately without passing what's called the CBEST test. And so they would be able to teach as a substitute teacher with a 30-day credential in our classrooms for the 24-25 school year before they need to be required to take the CBEST test. Very much a positive, helpful thing.
Great. Any board members have any questions on this item?
No, just a comment. I mean, we're always in need of subs, so anything that we can do to
Absolutely.
ensure that we get some help in the classroom.
Fewer barriers
Yes.
for some discussion in classroom.
I assume most districts are taking this.
They are. Yes. You'll need a bachelor's degree. It's the basic credential requirement. So I can do the all-call for substitutes, and always raise your hand if you have a bachelor's degree. We can help you out and you'll have a job tomorrow.
Since there's no public comment on this item, would someone like to make a motion?
Steve, I move that we approve the substitute annual statement of need.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, the motion carries. All right. So now we're on to our discussion items. Superintendent, should we have the presentation and then public comment?
That's how we usually do it.
That's how we usually do it. So I just wanted to be clear that we'll have a presentation from the district on the Wagner Ranch nature area with an update. And then we will have board discussion, and then we will take public comment, and then we may have more board discussion. So thank you.
Okay. So the discussion tonight around Wagner Ranch nature area, just the overview of the agenda. So we'll just do a quick overview of the property and the current status of the closure of the property. I mean, I think we've updated the board a couple of times, so this is just a brief update of where we stand. With that, then we'll discuss the property reopening status and plans, and the funding sources for possibility of the reopening of the nature area. We'll then discuss the next steps and the opening plans. So with regards to the nature area property, I think most of the board members and people in the audience have been there. It is a highly valued, unique nature preserve and a historic site located in Orinda and owned by the district. The area is just under the 19 acres and you can see meadows, forests, ponds, and streams. It's borders by San Pablo Creek, borders on one side of the nature area, and it's home to thousands of native plants and animal species. The property includes, there are three kind of specific phases that we talk about. The Wagner Ranch Elementary School Garden, then there's the Nature Area Garden, and the Wagner Ranch Nature Area itself. When it comes to the outdoor education and what's been happening around on the nature property over the years, Orinda students have participated in years of outdoor education, field trips, hands-on experiential educational opportunities organized at the property. Summer camps have been held in the past, allowing for students to take part in various educational activities, and local charity groups and high school students have participated in volunteer opportunities in the garden and nature area. So the current status, the nature area suffered significant damage during the 22-23 storms. And during that time, the staff actually, Stuart and myself, met with the board members from the nature area. The Friends of the Nature Area decided that the property should be closed due to safety concerns. The main safety concern was due to downed and falling trees at the time. The paths were eroded and washed away, not only the paths just throughout the nature area, but around the creek itself that was underwashing the paths. The creeks and stagnant water have damaged parts of the area, have made it unsafe to be accessed by the students, staff, and the volunteers. And then since the initial closure in the 22-23, we've had additional storms, and then there's been a lack of ongoing maintenance before and after the storms that have contributed to additional damage and increasing safety concerns in that area. So with that, the current status of the property and our major safety concerns, we have several very large trees that have fallen during the 22-23 storms, and they continue to fall due to that initial damage and due to the lack of ongoing, just ongoing over the years, appropriate maintenance. We have newly fallen trees. Every time we visit the area, and Stuart and I go in there pretty regularly, we see either newly fallen broken trees or very large limbs that are either falling down, are broken off, or have fallen since. We see very uneven paths. They're overgrown now, they're washed away, and some of the area blocked to access. There's significant overgrowth, clearly, as nobody's been using it, officially using it, of plants and a lot of poison oak in the area. There's quite a bit of standing pools of water, especially in what we've been called the kitchen area. A lot of mosquitoes, a lot of bites in that area. So during the last couple of board meetings when we have presented this, we've talked about phased reopening of the nature area. We truly believe that the nature area should be reopened to the students and the Orinda community as soon as possible. The district has no interest in keeping the area closed. We know that the longer it's closed, the more storm damage there is. And so there is no purpose to the district for the area to be closed. So we would love to have it reopened to our students as soon as we can. So at that time, a phased reopening approach was committed to. So we reopened Wagner Ranch School Garden because that's where it was funded by the Wagner Ranch Parent Club. Then the Nature Area Garden itself was reopened in October, and that was funded by the Boys Team charity. And then the nature area itself remains closed due to the significant cost of the reopening. And if you kind of think of concentric circles that have been reopened, it's because it's fenced in so that we can actually block access. So to safely reopen the nature area, we must mitigate those safety concerns. So the highest safety concerns are the fallen and imminently falling trees or branches that have to be removed on and above all the footpaths. So at this point, we're not even talking about removing all of the falling trees. We're just talking about above the footpaths where people would be going and walking around the area.
So once the trees are cleared from the area of the paths, the nature area could be reopened with additional planned work. So after the initial reopening, we could talk about additional trees and branches. And what Stuart and I, when we were meeting with the arborist, the plan was if we can reopen the areas of the paths and make those safe, then signage can be placed to not go into deeper into the area, or even possible some sort of ranch fencing or something blocking, at least making it visible where people should not go in until that work is done or indefinitely. And we're talking paths throughout the entire 19 acres. We're not talking just limited paths. Then we would love to we need to repair the paths to provide accessibility. We're a school district. Our paths have to be accessible to students and volunteers and staff. We need to mitigate the vegetation to allow safe access, and clearly standing water mitigation where there's issues with regards to access. So we have explored safe removal of trees from paths. Stuart and myself met with our certified arborist, actually Reg Barrett, who's standing right there, has met and walked the property with us as well. We walked the entire property and all of the paths. The arborist, what we would work with the certified arborist would be that he would serve as a consultant to help prepare a bid package. So we actually have most of the bid package prepared. What we're waiting for is the specific number of trees that would be removed, number of branches, and so on. So that would go around, basically tag each tree, each branch that would need to be removed for that safe opening. So then the arborist would also provide consult during the tree removal project. So once the bid is out and we need to do a public bid, as that's required legally of us as a public entity, then that consult by the certified arborist would continue throughout the project as it continued to make sure that we don't do any damage to the trees and it's done appropriately. We have not gotten an official quote because we haven't gone for a public bid yet due to the funding, but we have gotten a rough estimate in a range of $250,000 to $400,000 of how much it would cost to actually mitigate that initial reopening. So the first estimate was 250,000, then it was around 300, and now with actually the work that needs to be done after these storms is up to $400,000 to just reopen the nature area of the trees around the paths. So that cost is what's been prohibitive of us reopening the nature area. It really comes down to the funding. So this slide really talks about just the money of how we're funded in general and our priorities for the funding. So we are local control fund formula funding, or LCFF district, with one of the lowest per student funded allocations in the state. I put that bullet in there that just shows we don't get much extra funding if we don't even get sufficient funding from the state to fund our basic needs of our programs. 64% of our revenue is received from the state dollars, 14% is received from the three parcel taxes, and then 9% of it is revenues from one foundation and parent clubs. We believe that the district must prioritize our excellent core education for all students. The available revenues are allocated to support our high quality curriculum, instructional practices, and student support. We're, as a staff, are responsible for maintaining a stable budget to support our district priorities, and we do have a fiduciary responsibility to spend those resources as appropriate and legally required by the state. We do not receive any revenues allocated to specifically maintain the nature area. The state actually doesn't receive specific facility, or we do not receive specific facility maintenance resources. The state has recently allocated some district funding for facilities and actually has cut it then. So we don't actually receive really facility funding. So we have struggled with aging facilities due to lack of support to maintain our grounds. So we cannot, and we do not recommend allocating general fund dollars to reopening and maintenance of the nature area. The district's facing budget shortfalls, the state revenue reductions, and therefore general budget reductions. So allocation of general fund revenue to the nature area would result in significant cuts to OES2 core programming, meaning teachers, support programs, curriculum. So funding other than general fund must be available to reopen the area. So what are those options? We're going to examine a couple of different options. As I think the board is aware, we've discussed this in a couple of meetings. There's a legislative budget appropriation secured through Assembly Member Rebecca Bauer-Kayan. There are other funds other than general fund within the district that we would like to discuss, or possible partnerships with organizations to support conservation and ongoing maintenance, or anything else that we're open to if there's anything else out there. I do want to mention just briefly, because if there are questions in here that are non-educational and related to conservation, then we do actually have Mr. Harold Freeman, unless he's gone.
He's over there.
Where is he? Okay, there you are. Thank you very much. So if there are questions very specific to that funding, Harold Freeman is one of Lozano Smith attorneys that could help us answer these specific questions. So what is this option? So Assembly Member Rebecca Bauer-Kayan secured $1.5 million in support of the nature area. As a reminder, I want to say about 2 years ago, we were approached by Assembly Member's office saying that this is a possibility, and we actually wrote an ask of Legislative office in an amount of $4.5 million. That was declined by the state. And then a year later, or actually in this fiscal year, the Assembly Member's office came back and said that they had requested this on our behalf and secured it in the amount of $1.5 million, which we were excited. Excited it wasn't 4.5, but very thrilled for the generosity of $1.5 million. We had established the common goals and agreed that we wanted to preserve and protect the nature area as a nature space. That space would not be developed upon, and that it would be maintained as a nature area. The goal of opening the nature area for student use, absolutely agreed upon, and nature area for community use. And there was some hope to, bring back some of the festivals, smaller festivals like the Olive Festival and so on. There were the details and terms of that funding allocations were not available at the initiation of that allocation. We have been engaged in negotiations with the Assembly Member staff to develop those terms of the agreement, actually all throughout today. So even as this was posted on Friday, we are still in conversations because this is a very generous allocation and we would love to, and we need the funds. So, and we do have these common goals. So there are still terms negotiated in how we can make this work. I'm sorry that this is such small writing. I'm going to try and increase it.
Thank you.
So I'll kind of cruise through and then I'll minimize it. So there are some terms that the district would absolutely want to be able to do immediately. Should we have the funds, we would immediately bid, contract, and pay for the repairs necessary to allow for reopening of the nature area. We would utilize the funds for the conservation and maintenance of the area of 5 years. The reason it says 5 years is because that's what we estimated the $1.5 million to go through. So to pay for the initial reopening, to pay for 5 years of maintenance, to also pay for outdoor education classrooms, so that outdoor area, meaning to rejuvenate it, construction of the restroom, hiring of the curriculum staff member, upgrading of the current area facilities, paths, maintenance for the next 5 years. So when we developed the budget based on the estimates that which the board discussed and agreed to, it took really 5 years. We also discussed seeking funding for years beyond because the district has no intention of building on that area or developing that area. It's our intention then to seek further ongoing maintenance, funding to support the ongoing maintenance of the nature area. We also met with the city manager, David Biggs, and City and Parks and Rec, Todd Trimble, to open negotiations of can we partner with the city of Orinda to offer some camps. And they're very open to that. So we can't do that this summer, but even in the future, we have a really great relationship with the city of Orinda, and we have great agreements with them already on some of our other fields. So what can we do to possibly have a good collaborative partnership there as well, and work with them closely? And we would want to do that. We would open the area immediately to offer outdoor education to our students and students beyond Orinda. An area would be open to host community volunteers and community festivals. What we as a staff do not recommend, and this is where I would ask maybe Harold to help as well in explaining, is placing the 16 acres, which is proposed, of the district property into a perpetual conservation easement, which is our understanding is the definition of placing the conservation easement needs to be perpetual or in perpetuity. We believe that $1.5 million is not sufficient for maintenance of the property in perpetuity. The reason the 99 years is written there is because we've received that information as well from the Assembly Member's office that maybe it could be 99 years. For all purposes, for us, that is in perpetuity as well. And therefore, the district cannot agree to being what we understand is locked into an agreement that may prevent us from exploring possible other agreements or exploring other funding options that could help us find ways to reach other agreements to help us maintain that property. We cannot recommend an agreement in perpetuity as we don't know circumstances of the future and what other agreements we need to make to actually help us maintain the property. So due to those requests that we understand are made by the Assembly Member's office, the district staff does not recommend acceptance of the funds with these in perpetuity mandates. So with that, the staff, again, we see tremendous value in reopening the nature area. We also see absolute need in ensuring ongoing maintenance and support of the programs. It's not a one-time expense. Staff, we don't recommend, again, use of general fund dollars because that would result in reduction of our core programming, and we just cannot do that. So mentioned that there are other funds that are restricted for facility or grounds use. There are two such funds. There's Fund 40 and Measure E and I bonds that we pose to the board for discussion this evening. Fund 40, which at the second interim had about, just in excess of $3 million, can only be utilized for facility or grounds use. It is one-time money. Will go away. It does not get replenished. And right now is being utilized for emergency repairs, which we have a lot of because we have very aging buildings that the bond dollars are just not enough to maintain or to repair all of them. But with that said, if we as a district are truly committed and we cannot find an agreement to the Assembly Members' dollars, the district would like to explore use of the Fund 40 dollars to possibly reopen the area with our district funding and then continue working on the securing of the ongoing funds, as we've mentioned already, in possible conservation easement with other agencies and so on that would allow us to have ongoing funding for the programs that we already said we would commit to in that area. There's Measure E and I dollars in the actual language of the Measure E and I, and what the former board has agreed to. There is some language actually for outdoor education.
The staff right now is not recommending that, but it is up for discussion of the board because the bond dollars have just been spent down so much more quickly than originally planned due to escalation of COVID and global shortages and costs that at this moment, we're not recommending that. We also know there are FEMA dollars still available for reimbursements. Really hard to get sometimes. It's really labor intensive to submit it, but should we spend the money, we would go down the route of trying to get some reimbursements due to storm damages. When we say other partnerships, we as a staff have over the years, even 2-3 years ago, engaged in potential partnerships to place the nature area into trusts, into open space. We had paused those in these conversations of potential legislative agreements, but we can continue those discussions. We can revisit those discussions. We would need a lot of legal advice on what does that look like to the board and to the staff. So we just pose that as a discussion to what is the direction of the board to us in relating, exploring those potential partnerships. There are, those potential area, we would need a lot of advice. We are experts in curriculum, instruction, learning, student support, not land trusts. So what does it look like in potential placing into conservation easements with other organizations to see what is, but if the board gives us a blessing to do that, we are happy to explore those other relationships and other ways to do those long-term ongoing maintenance easements. We don't, at this moment, look, there's other grants and such that we could explore. They just take time. So we would look at that possibly on top of this initial reopening. So again, I just want to reiterate that we're committed to reopening the nature area for student and community use. We're committed to protecting the area as nature space. The challenge has been extensive damage and high cost without secured funding source. The additional challenge is the need for ongoing maintenance because we don't want this type of damage to come back again. So that's in front of us right now.
I know all of our board members have lots of questions. I don't know how you feel. I'd like to hear from our attorney about what it means to put a piece of property in a perpetual conservation easement, what limitations that has, what restrictions that poses in perpetuity to the district. I would like a better understanding of what that really means, if that's okay with everyone.
That's fine. I have some additional questions as well. So maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I know we all have questions.
I meant for our attorney as well.
Okay, good. Okay, hi, Harold.
This is Harold Freeman.
Hi, nice to see you all. Let me start with your question. So a conservation easement has a very specific meaning in California. There's a civil code set of sections, Civil Code 815 following sections. They're short if anybody ever wants to read them. They're actually pretty straightforward. And they basically allow you to put land into a permanent, and it is permanent, it's laid out in the statute, condition where it's accessible to the public, it's kept as open space. And that is really the main condition of it. That is forever once you put that easement in place. And an easement, just to actually even back up on that, the concept of an easement is generally to allow access for something onto your property. And it becomes a right that runs with property. Once it's placed there, if it's permanent, it's with that property forever. So literally a conservation easement, if you go that route per the statute in California, you are forever setting aside the land for open space purposes. If you are the owners for all time of that land, it also means you carry with it all of the liabilities for that, all of the responsibilities for it, all of the costs for it. So when in California, when you have a conservation easement, what is normally done is it's an agreement with somebody. It's an agreement with a nonprofit, it's an agreement with a land trust, sometimes it's an agreement with a funding source, so that it's spelled out exactly what the terms are being agreed to as to what that easement is. You can't just say, put an easement on that property, because you have to ask the next question, what do you want the easement to say? And so typically it's done with an agreement. I shared with the superintendent, we were involved with a wildly complex one where Gavilan Community College in San Jose Gilroy area is building a new campus, it has to procure land that is basically wildlife set-aside land to make up for the fact that it's putting buildings where there now is some habitat. There's also a major developer in the area that is doing the same thing. So in a very complex deal, the housing developer and the district partnered together, and the developer coordinated the grant, the conservation easement, permanent easement, to a nonprofit, essentially a land trust, a nonprofit foundation. That foundation will then enforce that easement. It will make sure that everything is being done. But one of the major things about the agreement is that the developers also funding annually hundreds of thousands of dollars in perpetuity to continue the upkeep of that property. So it's basically a contract. The community college district and the developer keep this space available for wildlife habitat. The developer continues to fund it in perpetuity. And one of the other things about the conservation easement is that it is an enforceable easement, meaning if someone feels that you are not living up to the terms of your conservation easement, a lawsuit can be filed. And per the statutory scheme, if that person succeeds in suing, the holder of the easement, the grantor, of the easement, which is the school district, has to pay their attorney's fees. So again, there's this ongoing source of liability. One other thing, and then I'm happy to take more questions. If you have a 99-year easement, which has also been mentioned, that is by definition not a conservation easement. That's just an easement you agree to. And it's a really simple illustration on that. Many different public agencies have easements in place, and land have easements in place with PG&E. Those easements explain in great detail that PG&E can come onto your property to maintain lines, to do repairs, and they usually come with an agreement that they also have to restore the property if they come in to make repairs, and they will indemnify you, hold you harmless if they cause any damage when they come on. So first there's an agreement, and then there's an easement. That's usually how it operates. So if there were to be a 99-year easement, there would still be a need to figure out what the terms of that easement would be. A 99-year easement for what, for whom to come on to do what, who's going to be responsible for what. So even if it's not technically a conservation easement, we're probably still talking about, we need to know what the it is when we talk about granting the easement.
I know the board members have lots of questions. So you want to start and we'll come down the
Sure.
line?
I mean, well, one of the questions that I had about the perpetual conservation easement, I think one of the not sticking point, but one of the topics that has come up is, the $1.5 million only covers so many years of maintenance and, reopening and that sort of thing. And I've kind of read and heard different things about whether or not we would be able to go out for additional funding sources if we enter into this perpetual conservation easement, or are we restricted to the $1.5 million? If you,
So
do you follow my question?
Yes, I do. Everything depends on what that easement says and what the agreement for the easement is. Is there something in there that restricts your ability to go out for funding? Again, using just a hypothetical illustration, let's say somebody out there wants to put an interpretive center and pay you a significant amount to put that in. So they'll fund $1 million interpretive center there. Does adding a nature interpretive center violate the terms of the easement or not? We don't know what the easement's going to say. We don't know what that agreement's going to be. If it says no development of structures on the site, you can't go get that $1 million to build the interpretive center, even though that interpretive center may be, a wonderful central part of the use of a public open space area, nature area. And you can keep spinning out these examples. That's why it's so important to understand what the it is. If you have the right terms in the easement and the right terms in the agreement to create the easement, you can probably structure it in a way that it doesn't restrict your ability to go out and seek funding.
So I think one of, my goals, and I know we're not going to accomplish it this evening, obviously this is not on for action, we're talking about this, but I did have a conversation with the Assemblywoman this morning, and I think we share the same interest in terms of wanting to, reopen this area, secure these funds. She shared with me, that she's really looking for conservation of, 16 acres, making this a nature area. She understands $1.5 million is not going to, carry us in perpetuity. My understanding from my conversation with her is, she shares this vision of going out for additional funds when we need to. Beyond that, continuing with, conversations about partnership with the city. I guess I would just like to see if there's some language that we can work out, that allows us to accomplish our shared goals and still be able to get that money without necessarily having this, perpetual conservation easement. I do think there's a chance of some sort of agreement or contract that we could write that is an easement, but, so I would like to see those conversations continue. I do understand that there was some sort of appraisal done on the property that, perhaps limited the dollar amount to what, is being proposed to us today. We haven't seen that appraisal. I would love to see that. I don't know if we will get to see that. But I think that's, number one, I would like to see that. I would also, agree with the superintendent's recommendation about exploring using Fund 40 to reopen. I think that's what those dollars are. We don't have a resolution that has been adopted by a board as far as how we're spending those dollars, but we had kind of reached consensus at one point about using those for kind of emergency funding for facilities. And I see this as that need. So that is something that I would like to see as well.
Yeah, that answers quite a bit of between your answers and what you just said. That's a lot of what I had to say. I first just want to say that it was already in your presentation as well, but I really want to see this area reopened and used. Students appreciate this area so very much, and everybody wants it open, including myself for sure. This is just really tricky. So I want to be sure prior to accepting any kind of resources that this is the right move to make, especially given the timeline that you just described, which could be in perpetuity or 99 years, and all the strings attached to these different agreements. And I don't feel like I've had enough information from what was presented from the Assembly member's office to be comfortable doing that. This is a significant responsibility that the district carries. It's also amazing that the district carries it, but we own property that we want to conserve and preserve for the community. That's unique. That's not a normal setup for a school district. I don't know if you know of another school district that has a piece of property that's also used as an nature area. It's rare to be the owner of that land. And so I think it's tricky, and it needs to be handled really carefully in this situation, given what you just described. One thing that I wrote down here when you were speaking related to liabilities, and if it were in a conservation easement, that the liability remains with the district in perpetuity. And I think that's something to highlight and name, especially if we continue to have students access it and be open to all, but the school district is carrying liability for that. There's tremendous cost potentially associated with that. And again, 1.5 million will not go very far at all. It will barely open it. Truly, I think we've seen how quickly money goes when you have it for facilities. So that needs to be taken into consideration. And I agree with Hillary. Appreciate this offer and this grant, and the ability to have that resources is appreciated. It just has to be done extremely carefully. Right now, I don't have enough information for that. Fund 40, I would like to explore that more. Within reason, that is our only pot of money for things like emergency repairs, which have come up many times, even on my short time on the board. But I do think it's there for these kind of things. I just won't go that far. I'm less inclined to explore measures E&I. That money is almost entirely theoretically spent on the projects that we've already engaged in. So I don't really think that's a place where there's a lot of resource.
Yeah, thank you. We have a lot of what's been said here, but I kind of wanted to pick your brain a little bit more about the financial kind of side of these arrangements, because I think my fear, which is probably similar to others, is that if we were to enter into this agreement, we've kind of given away our best kind of opportunity to get the funding that we need to maintain this thing over time. And so if there is this opportunity to kind of enter into one of these easements, in some of the other deals that you've seen or other arrangements and contracts that you've seen people enter into, is the piece of land that's, you know, and the fundraising amount that is then kind of turned over for this complex one with the developer, does that amount of money typically reflect, or whether it's a one-time amount to the property owner becomes the funder, or whether it's a, you know, some kind of arrangement, you know, the full life, like an ongoing life, because it just feels like this is not enough, and we just don't want to end up, we get there in 1.5, we spend it to fix it up, we do a couple different things, and then in 5 years we have no money and no way to get any more money again. Not because we're not contractually allowed to even, but just because, you know, from the outside perspective, from the marketing perspective, it looks like the land is concerned, even though it's not really, and it becomes once again unavailable to the public, and then we're not a good stewards of this property. So anyway, the real question for you is, what do you see in these deals? If you can share anything, do they tend to get something close to fair market value? How much does it incorporate long-term maintenance? Would love some more examples if you have any.
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of different types of conservation easements out there, because again, it's all subject to negotiation, working out a deal. In the example I used from Galvin Community College District, there the developer is stepping in. They're going to be the holder of that property. They're going to own that property. They're buying that property. They're funding it in exchange for building thousands of homes. Yeah, which is what's going to fund the ongoing. And I'm sure what they're doing is setting aside a significant amount that's going to skin off interest that then will be used over the years to deal with it. The other most typical example is it's not the land owner who is paying for it. You're arranging to have a land trust, somebody else come in who have the funds to deal with it. We've also all seen, you know, now Gallup Land Trust has been very active. They will just buy the property. They will impose that conservation easement on it, and they will fund it. They do the entire piece of it. So there's many models as you can think of as how to do this. The other school districts that we work with that own park land or open space land, generally speaking, they own it, they operate it, they maintain it, and there's no conservation easement in place. It's just they own it and they operate it, which is really been the model until now. They also generally haven't been faced with massive problems with trees coming down and making it inaccessible. But again, it all comes down to you can structure this however you would like to structure it. It really does. The statute does not talk about an agreement to get there. But if you read any of the literature online about conservation easements, they frequently do talk about the agreement, because you have to know what is it we're conserving, what access are we allowing. And as an example, I'll throw out another example. If you have part of this the public has access to the nature area, that may create an obligation on the district to give the public access to the nature area, which means if in 2027 or 2032 or 2091, there's a major storm and trees come down, the district is financially obligated to go in and remove those trees, or else you're denying the access to the public, which is why you have to structure these easements really carefully.
And you had said specifically, because I was taking notes, that accessible to the public is typically a characteristic of conservation easements. Is that a required characteristic? Because we have other reasons why, accessibility to the public, given the program for children, it's not necessarily something that we work.
The statute talks more about open space. It talks about leaving it as open space. So again, this is why it goes to, what is that easement going to say? Is it going to say in perpetuity that the public is permitted to access the site? Is it going to say in perpetuity the site will never be developed for housing, for example? Well, it all depends on what you say, which again is why if your neighbor comes to you and says, I want an easement on your property, you're going to start having a conversation about an easement to do what? And what protections are built in for us if we give you that easement? And we just lack the detail.
First of all, thank you for being here. I'm in agreement with all that my colleagues have shared. I really want to thank the Assembly member for this funding and supporting our nature area. It's amazing. It's important that we have it. And I know, like our community, I'm grateful that we do have it. As I mentioned during September 2023, November 2023 board meetings, I would really like us to pursue a National Historic Site designation for that area. There is funding with that from the National Park Service, the National Trust for Historic Preservation. And the questions I have for you are, how with pursuing that funding, would that affect the funding that the assembly member has provided? How does that affect the easement? Any type of obligations that we have if we're asking and pursuing federal funding under, the National Park Service or the National Trust for Historic Preservation? Is there funding or grants available? Is it tribal land that we can place into a trust through funding from the federal government? How does that affect the monies from the assembly member? Those are more questions that I have for you, because really, the National Trust for Historic Preservation, there's so much in National Park Service that would allow us to reopen, that would take care of the land. But I'm just wanting to know, what obligations would we have? What is possible with any of those? What are the possibilities, really?
Well, the possibilities are there, but again, just to illustrate that, the Olive Festival was mentioned. So if you receive this money and you have an easement that says, I'm not making this up, that says right in it, thou shalt allow the Olive Festival in perpetuity to occur on that site, what are the conditions of the federal funding? Do they not support the Olive Festival? Do they want it to be pure open space? Do they want it just to be educational? We don't know. There's a whole lot of pieces we don't know. What we want to make sure is that we're not agreeing to anything that closes the door to any creative funding or use in the future. And again, that's why I mentioned the interpretive center. And that's not just hypothetical, because I lived through that before, where there was a fight over school district-owned land, where there was a preservation group that wanted to put a center there, an interpretive center, where people could come and learn about the nature area, and they could put out literature, they could have guides and whatnot. And there was another entity that was opposed to having anything built on that piece of land. So we worked it out, but it took us several years to work it out. There's an interpretive center there now. But that's why, again, it all comes down to what is that easement going to say. In speaking to the assembly member staff, an example that they gave of funding for another school district was Fort Pleasanton Unified School District. They funded the district putting in one or more of its school sites refillable stations for water bottles. That was easy. They were given money, they put in the stations, the state can see the stations are there and they're done. So you wouldn't need to work through all of these complications. Here, we don't know what the term is used, strings attached. Maybe a better way to say it is just what are the conditions of receiving the state funding, and is in any way cutting off the possibility to get creative sources of funding down the road.
That's exactly what I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. That's exactly, Harold and I have been in all of these meetings with the staff, is trying to get the conditions to make sure that they don't cut off these kind of, as we're going for additional grants or additional designations or additional partnerships. We don't want to prevent that, because we don't want any of this to prevent additional funding, because it's not enough in perpetuity. So we're going to need additional funding. We know that. So there are other options, but we can't list all of them because we don't know. So we don't want any terms to preclude other funding. Have
we actually seen the legislative language of the actual money? I mean, she says that it's been designated $1.5 million, she being our Assemblywoman. What does the language of that designation say or look like?
There's no language.
It has to be a line in a budget. It has to be somewhere.
We haven't seen it.
Is there some way for us to figure that out? I guess is one of my questions, so that we could actually see what the legislative allocation, if it's just part of a bigger package, or where it's coming from specifically.
I think what I've seen in the budgets, on the state budget, it just says legislative asks, and it's a bigger, and then.
Okay. I guess I'm just curious, because I don't know if it's a legislative ask, how much control. I know we've had a lot of back and forth trying to negotiate and understand. I think as a board member, I'm concerned about giving away in perpetuity property that is for our students and our community without understanding all the liabilities and problems that we could have down the road. Certainly, there will be more storms. Certainly, we will have more damage in the future. So certainly, we will want to do more things in the nature area as time goes on. So I guess I'm just concerned that we have some method of either negotiating an agreeable outcome with the legislator's office, or deciding that maybe that's not the best route forward for us. But I think that from what I'm hearing from my fellow board members and what I feel is we all want to open the nature area and want to look at different ways of funding the nature area, and that we should look at spending Fund 40 money and maybe going down a reimbursement route as a way of, let's just get it open and going again so that we can, move forward. I'm concerned about the time frame of the June 30 deadline for the money from the legislature. And I'm very concerned about the ongoing liabilities and restrictions that might cause for us. And I don't know if we'll be able to get answers to those questions in a timely enough fashion.
I mean, I do think it's worth continuing the conversation with the
Absolutely.
member's office and trying to get
Absolutely.
those answers, because I think, as I mentioned, there is a shared interest, and she, would like to see those dollars, allocated.
You would too.
Yes.
But I'd like it to be more like the water filling restation, like specific, fund the $400,000 to cut down the trees and put, 1.1 million in a trust for this or something, something a little bit more specific. The conservation easement makes me very nervous. And that's not to say that I don't want to conserve the nature area, because I absolutely do want to conserve the nature area and keep it for its purpose. I don't want to give up the district's right in those properties. So that's my concern.
So I think the questions around, can we seek additional funding? So like the National Park Service, the National Trust for Historic Preservation, is it tribal land that we can seek separately money from for the Bureau of Indian Affairs? I mean, on the federal level, how can we work together and collaborate there? If it's possible to seek additional funding.
I think we have 10. Is it 10?
There's more to that.
More than that.
There's 12 comments.
Well, 12 people have requested to make a public comment, and we want to hear from all of them. We have 20 minutes set aside for public comment. So there are two options here. That would be to have each speaker have a minute and a half, or to have speakers combined in groups. Each group could have 5 minutes. So I don't know if your messages are similar or dissimilar. I don't know if you know that. So not seeing anything from the audience, I would suggest that we start with a minute and a half per speaker, and see if we can hear all the comments of everyone who wishes to speak tonight.
And maybe we can read 3 names at a time so they can be ready.
Sure.
Okay.
So we have Kathy Barrett, Bella Stratford, and Taurus Yeager are the top 3 cards on my stack.
I would suggest that we have Bella, a student, be able to speak first.
That's fine.
She's still here in the audience.
I spoke with you about Bella.
Okay.
Another student, they had to leave because they have.
Okay.
The suggestion was to email things in, but perhaps.
Absolutely. As I said, this is a discussion item, and we are interested in all input, and I'm happy that you've all heard the discussion that we've had, so you can understand the issues we're all struggling with. And we're, as always, trying to work together to come up with the best solutions for Orinda.
Oh, I don't think she called out.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
I just thought maybe it just starting, just one, because I was a former student, so I thought maybe that could just fill I just wanted to give my letter in at public comment, actually, so I could attend a public meeting in which I'm a panelist, but was told I couldn't do that. So I've actually chosen to be here this evening rather than at the public meeting in order to hand in my letter. That was really good, but was moved by the fact that these other 2 students really wanted to speak and they weren't able to. And it really spoke to my experience and why the nature nature area was important to me. And the idea of limiting 20 minutes to this just seems really sad. So I'm just submitting my letter and I hope it will be considered. The Fund 40 sounds like maybe the way to go, just somehow to get this done, because it's been like a year now that we've been talking about it.
Thank you, Ingrid. All right,
So Kathy.
Kathy Torres and Steve Danziger.
I'm Kathy Barrett. I've lived in Orinda since 1975. I want to thank all of you for your long hours of dedication to keeping your Orinda schools so excellent and vibrant. I also have been reflecting on the years that I've spent speaking to the Board of Trustees about the values of the agriculture nature area, its historical and ecological uniqueness. Starting in 2005, back in history, you may recall that the OUSD wanted to build a maintenance yard on the historic olive grove. Well, that went over like a lead balloon with the community, and thousands of people stomped the streets and gathered petitions. And my friends and family did that too. So fast forward, the Friends of the Wagner Ranch Nature Area have been funding the nature area programs since 2008, which is when the district terminated the nature area programs, including Native American Studies, Rancho Days, Pioneer Days, Animal Camp. And so my time is up. However, our group shares the community's concerns. We've heard tonight that close to 1,000 or more individuals have signed petitions concerned that the $1.5 million garnered by Assembly Member Rebecca Barracan may be turned down. And what would this do to jeopardize Orinda's ability to get state money again in the future for programs such as this one or others, could be health, whatever. So on behalf of our organization and the community that has spoken out very forcefully with petitions and the like, we request that the district establish a task force in the very near future, quickly. I mean, we've been listening to this for 7 months. You've been equivocating, and we've wondered what on earth is going on. We need a task force, an independent one, to look at what are the options. 1.5 million seems pretty good to us, given that the nature area has been closed since, well, for the last year for sure, and then pre-COVID it was restricted. So our programs were doing the only educational events in the nature area on behalf of the community. Our community, the Orinda community and the community beyond, deserves your consideration for that. Thank you.
I appreciate how complicated this issue is for the Board of Trustees. But my heart is with the students, and my heart aches for the students that missed out on the programs in 23, and they missed out on all the programs this year. And I want to just see that nature area open with whatever it takes. My feeling is the 1.5 is where to start. And this is a very intelligent, dedicated community. We can raise the additional funds going forward for whatever agency we bring in. And I know there's people in the community that will step up with some kind of fund that we could use to continue maintenance of the nature area. And the high school kids are dying to get out there and weed and clear the trails and whatever. They will maintain it. It's free labor and they love doing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve here?
I'll see it.
President Hockey and members of the board, my name is Steve Danziger. I'm a 29-year resident of Orinda and an active community volunteer. From the presentation, I'm glad you're looking at other funding and partnerships. My two sons, as well as thousands of other students, including some of your children, have participated in the nature and cultural education programs in the nature area. Many of these students will cite days spent in the nature area as their greatest memory of elementary school. I have personally spoken to young adults who pursued higher education in the sciences and environmental studies because of it. I believe that the decision you make regarding this may be the defining moment of your tenure on this board. You need to reject the staff recommendation to decline the money, direct staff to accept the funds and comply with conditions, and work with the assembly member to put the correct language into the conservation easement that will allow infrastructure and facilities like an intemperance center, like a person said. Your legacy can be preserved and protected by making the right decision tonight. You can either do what is right, or you can pound the nail in the coffin and say you're not going to do anything further. There may be other funding available from generous community members, but this is a lifeline that is irreplaceable if you don't accept this money. It's fantasy to think that funding of this magnitude will be available in the future. Enough is enough. Do the right thing. Accept this money and the conditions. And finally, just paraphrase Thoreau. I would let our children take a walk in the nature area woods and come out taller than the trees. Thank you.
Lise Evans?
I am also interested in seeing the $1.5 million that Rebecca Bauer-Kazan has offered as a grant to the nature area agreed to. It sounds like there's a lot of questions that have risen about how the land is to be utilized. And I don't understand why they didn't come out earlier and why there was not more progress made to resolving these questions. It seems like it would be a shame, a real shame, to lose $1.5 million in this grant to create this outdoor classroom where kids can be spontaneous, they can see the ecology, they can learn the interdependent relationships in nature. It imprints them, it inspires them to go on and make careers in science. And I just would appeal for this grant to be accepted and the educational programs being started. I hope that staff doesn't reject, I hope that the trustees will reject the staff's recommendation not to pursue it any further. I really hope that we can find a way, there must be some way to get this off the ground. So I encourage you to do your best. Thank you.
Penelope Gall, and then Bill Hudson after Penelope. Penelope here? No? Bill? Bill Hudson, do you want to speak? Okay.
So first of all, I want to thank you for your service and for the government schools. Glad to have a chance to talk about my ideas for doing the best for the kids. I came with a lot of questions, which I was going to ask. A lot of them got answered, but I think the main one is I did, half an hour's research on conservation easements. The point of the conservation easement, and I hope it's true in California, is that the creek came from development. After that, everything is fair game. And it sounds to me like there's if Rebecca, our pond, understands the need for increased revenue, but it's wide open to figure out an easement that we can use. And that'll be the job between now and June 30th, whenever it runs out. I think you could probably take that money and write the easement. So the only ongoing responsibility of the board, if the 1.5 million comes up, nothing else works out, is to do the minimum maintenance that's required for fire service and so forth. The money from this initial grant could go a long way towards solving that and mitigating it for the future. And it would take, I think, it's an item that we have to have on your budget right now is complying whatever the maintenance is for the district, for the nation area where it is now. Take it off your budget. And you could do work to mitigate the future, make sure the closures that's safe, and it requires less maintenance in the future, and it probably won't close again. The other thing I would say is, I think you've got a lot of other potential service revenue sources. I think you really ought to look at what those would take, how long it would be, and I don't think I think at the closest there would be years. I'm afraid if we turn this around, the nature of it we're open, and it sounds like there's a way to accommodate everything. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Josephine Solobero. Sorry.
That's close, great. So I'm here on behalf of the parents and the student volunteers who come to all these meetings, so you're probably tired of seeing me, but I think the bottom line is we have this gem in our community. Each one of you has a purpose to support your constituents as well as look at all the options that are on the table. And I really feel strongly like the discussion tonight, whether this is a grant, an agreement, I'm a little bit distorted with understanding all the details behind it, but I can't believe that we're in month 7 and we haven't looked at the language of what this is. So I would just beg each one of you who's sitting there to look at the language and to find creative ways of how we can support an opening. I do feel like with Steve, we have this as our initial lifeline, and why would we say no to that? The other thing that keeps coming to mind is this is an area that has been neglected for 1.5 years, if not longer, because we haven't been trimming trees in the nature area for I don't know how long. But this is a responsibility that the Orinda Unified School District has. Every tenant, every landowner, every business has a responsibility of maintaining their property. And so why is it that the Wagner Ranch nature area is not even part of our budget? How is it that June 1st, all of the property owners have to meet a June 1st fire safety prevention on our property, but we can consider not accepting this money to make sure that the trees that have fallen have not been cleared? And what if there was a fire, God forbid? Whose responsibility would that be? So I ask you to think about the fire prevention from the initial standpoint. Just, everybody else is cutting their bushes and trees and branches. And what if something would happen? I would hate to see the school district be responsible because we have neglected it. And so I'm just urging you to think about 1.5 million is a start. And I don't know, is this a grant that we can say yes to? And, the lawyers are the specialists that can create the language to say, here's what we want to see. And here's the open Venn diagram of what it could include. And so we don't narrow it down, we don't list it, we keep it open so that we can create what we want for the future. So on behalf of the 850 signatures that have been signed in the petition and tours going around and also the students going around asking friends and neighbors to sign it, we've received close to 1,000. And I understand that some of our board members were saying that we have not heard the parents and their concerns about Wagner Ranch. I beg to say, did we need to put together a petition to have you recognize that this is important to each one of us and your children and your children's children? So this is like generational. Thank you so much for all the work that you do, and it really could have an impact for future generations. And I love the idea of partnering potentially with land trusts and historical societies. And it is part of the Miwok tribe, right? So this is Native American and Orinda. So I think that we can check off that box.
Thank you. So I have Carly McGill.
Carly is a single mother, so she had to go back home, so can I read for us?
Yeah, sure.
She said, I grew up in Orinda and was fortunate enough to attend numerous field trips and classes at the Wagner Ranch Nature Area. I fondly remember hiking through the woods, learning about the foundations of the buildings still there and the importance of accessing the landscape. Those visits were so valuable, and I benefited from the exposure to a wild landscape, learning about the environment around me, and those experiences had a profound effect on me. That early exposure to the outdoors led me to a career at the United States Forest Service. I now live back in Orinda with my 7-year-old son who attends Wagner Ranch Elementary. I implore you to accept the funds to reopen the area and allow a new generation of Orindans to access this unique resource.
Great, thank you. I have Peggy McGillen.
Thank you. It was so heartwarming to hear all of you say how much you want to see it open. I'm a former teacher, retired teacher, and I'm teaching kids now. I teach camps in the summer. And I have worked with Taurus for 3 years. I've seen what she does. And now I work in Lafayette, where I headed up building a Miwok Ohlone village. We have 2 dwellings. We have an acorn granary, we have a shade shelter, and we have a sweat lodge. And people love coming here. The kids, children in school get recesses. Why? Not to just let go of energy, but to also have a different type of intelligence and activity in their experience for the day. And it's been shown that kids who have a chance to have experiential learning along with intellectual learning, the intellectual learning improves. I used to have gardens where I was teaching in Santa Monica, 3rd grade. And I had one kid on the spectrum who could not focus so well. So I sent him out to the garden. 20 minutes, he came back, he did just fine on a limited amount, but enough of the math, because he, as well as all people, need the chance to have experiential learning along with intellectual learning. So what happens in these camps and what happens in the villages is that adults come even and pounding acorns. Okay? They get lost. They get lost and mesmerized with this rhythmic participation with life. And who knows why, if there's a food element in there that, gee, I'm in nature, and this is part of my sustenance and how I get along with people, get along with the land. Sorry, I don't know why my voice is shaking. I guess I'm feeling emotional about this. In our world now, which is basically very much thought-driven, tech-driven, we're busy all the time with passwords and codes and whatnot. We've lost a lot of our connection to this experiential knowing that lives in children from the get-go. And they're finding now, we're reading about what Instagram is doing, all these things. Those kids are losing that connection, and we ourselves have lost it. So for our future, we do need to go back to a balance between really what is connective knowledge and intellectual knowledge. Be connected first, and then come up with those solutions shaped by the thinking brain to help bring true remedies for the world that we desperately need right now. So thank you for what you're doing. And it's great that everybody's here to speak for us. Thank you.
The final speaker I have tonight is Cinda McKinnon.
I'm with Friends of Orinda Creeks. And the nature area has been a partner with Friends of Orinda Creek since we started in 1993. Lots of support. Children helped us raise native plants that are used to revegetate the downtown creek in the riparian area. The nature area, as everyone has said, is the jewel in the crown of Orinda for the children. And I really hope that you can find a way to accept this money. I think it's really, it's a lot of money. I think it's really important. And we'd love to see it done in perpetuity. So I also want to second that it was so nice to hear all of you say that you were supportive of the nature area, that you wanted to see it reopened, that's very touching. Let's make it happen. You have tremendous community support. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go back to further board discussion, I want to thank everyone for coming and for, sorry that we had to limit your time somewhat, but I hope you feel that you've been heard. And if there's anything that you were not able to say, please feel free to email the whole board and myself, of course. Our phone numbers and emails are readily available on our website, and happy to discuss it more that way if necessary. But this is a discussion item that the board is obviously trying to find the best solutions for, and I appreciate the difficulties that we've encountered. And I think that there is a consensus that we want to figure out solutions to move forward. So I think it's really, from my perspective, important that we go ahead and get the bid packet together and get those RFPs so we know at least the initial costs. Let's start with getting the absolute, the bids and what the costs are to get the nature area in shape to reopen, hopefully for this coming school year. I mean, to me, that's the number one priority. And then to work with our esteemed legal counsel, to work with Rebecca Bauer-Cahan's office, to try to figure out if we can't work out terms that would be acceptable to everyone, so that wouldn't create additional liability in perpetuity for the district, but would allow us to have access to the funds, because the funds are obviously really important. I don't
just clarify that.
Yes.
So we'll work with Harold to continue to determine, because I've
It's getting the terms.
getting to terms, because I just want to make sure and clarify, because it came up in a couple comments and it was in your question, Cara, is there are no terms in the legislative ask. There's nothing that has come to the district to read. There is no terms presented to us except what we had just informed on the 3 goals that we agreed to, and what we had said, conservation easement in perpetuity. So there is nothing to read. And so if we are saying that why are we asking these questions? We've been asking these questions. And that's why we have finally said we just can't ask anymore. We have to move on with something else. So I just want to clarify that. So, and Harold's been in meetings with me along, please say if you understand anything differently. So I'm hearing for us to have Harold present terms, because because we're putting in general fund dollars towards this. I'm okay with it. I'm just saying that's what we're
So I
saying.
negotiate against ourselves, but it'd be great if they would.
That's what we're negotiating against ourselves.
I don't think we're negotiating against ourselves. I think
Keep negotiating.
They don't give you feedback.
Well, I think there haven't been any terms written. So I think if we write some terms at this point.
But we did write terms.
Yeah.
We wrote some, but I think that it wasn't perceived as being an actual proposal. That was what was represented to me.
So Harold, do you
And that's
think
what
there's
we
a
need back
way to write a 99-year easement that would be a solution to this?
I think, we just need the board's direction. We can put anything together. I do want to clarify, a proposal was sent in writing from the district to the assembly member's office when we were not receiving any direction. So there is a specific proposal that's there that did not include the 99 years. If we want to add the 99 years, that's something we would need the board direction on.
Our proposal included the 5 years and exploration of ongoing funding, which is what we.
And I think exploration of ongoing funding is necessary. I'm concerned about open space, because I don't think we want next to the school site to have strangers from the hills walking in during our school days. That could be, dangerous to our students and problematic. I think when we think about opening it to the Orinda community, I think we think about that in a
Well, I don't know if you could put in-
educational way, not a.
Well, and also I don't know if you could put in time limits of when it is open to the broader
Well, if it's
community.
conservation easement, if I understood correctly, it's in perpetuity.
It's
No,
in
but-
perpetuity.
I meant in terms of public access to the.
Public access during the day.
I'm just saying, it wouldn't be 99 years, it would be in perpetuity, right?
Right, but I think there's potential here for calling it a conservation easement of some other form and not having it
An official
be
conservation.
an official, perpetual,
It could be an easement.
an easement.
That's right.
Sorry, an
An
easement.
easement with the purpose of
I
conserving.
think that's what we should be proposing,
That's
is
what I'm
some
trying to
sort of easement that allows for additional funding once we get beyond this $1.5 million. I think we have to explore, I think this is for the board also, though, exploring if we're designating these 16 acres as, nature area as part of this, or as preserved nature area. I think those are some of the terms that I've heard is.
Yeah, I think we have to.
In addition,
Mindful about
just-
liabilities and public access.
Yes.
I just think, just for what it's worth, I might be in the minority here, but I would be worried about any, 99-year in perpetuity easement, 1.5 million, even if we got all the other things on that we wanted written into the easement. It was not a formal, whatever type of easement it ended up being. Just because I do feel like that is a one-shot opportunity, to bring in the funding that could really keep this thing open and safe and available to the community in perpetuity, and that's not enough.
I have a follow-up question regarding that. So it sounded in your initial description of a conservation easement, the district would be engaging with another entity, usually a nonprofit or trust, correct?
Typically.
Okay. Is an easement, not a conservation easement, a separate designation that does not involve another entity, just on our end establishes that we won't
Filed
develop
in
the land?
the deed, it would be filed against the land in the county recorder's office as, for a set number of years, this land is subject to this
Right,
easement.
but we would still
So it
maintain
would basically be,
control and not be engaged with another.
I don't think it would have to be
Because
with another
the
entity.
question around the conservation easement, to Eve's point, is, okay, so we do want this funding, we all really want this funding. If there's one chance to go put this, to partner with an organization, who is that organization? And is this in the best interest of the district, whoever that is? Sounds like there's many options out there. And at this point, we don't have information on this one and would like it. To follow up on that, for myself, and I think for all the board members, we're deeply concerned about this area. And I personally take this land and our responsibility very seriously. And that is why these questions are coming up before we accept this money, because there are strings attached and we need to know what those are before making that decision. So not because of a lack of care, or just give it as much time as we need before we open this thing. I want it open. I think everyone here has already said they want it open. And I want that funding. We all do as well. But what are the terms to it that are responsible?
And what liabilities come with that?
I did want to just say, unrelated to this $1.5 million, I just wanted to clarify that if we did use the fund $40, that would be immediate, right?
Right,
It's
yes.
not something, because there were some public comments around that. And I just wanted to clarify that
We would open up the bid.
that would be an immediate use of those funds. So it would not be an additional effort to delay. or
No,
anything.
no.
And that, if that's,
And it could be in addition of, it's not in lieu of.
Right. No, I understand. We could go for reimbursement of that fund if we get these dollars. But I just wanted that to be clear.
does anyone have any more direction that would, as a board member, you would like to give either our attorney or our superintendent as a sort of?
Yeah, and just to wrap up, because I don't know quite where we're at. I mean, I guess what I would advocate for is seeing if we could get the Assembly Member's Office to give us kind of their version of the term, like what would they, in more writing, because I think we're just all suffering from the lack of detail here and having to kind of fill in the blanks. And that's where I get nervous if we just keep giving them better and better offers, and without really.
I guess I don't see it as a better, I see it as just more clarity around what our offer is. Because I think there were some
Well, I mean, I
questions
think,
from,
okay, because I heard it as an explicit change in our offer from a 5-year to a 99-year. That makes me a little nervous, but.
I would agree. if we can have some clarity around what the terms are from the Assembly Member's Office in writing, so we can review it as a board. And, you know, publicly, of course, I know we have to do that. And then also answering our questions around seeking additional funding. I think that is critical, because we know about inflation and how much, you know, things change, storm, weather, whatever. And so we want to make sure that we can seek additional funding. And if we can't, then what is the solution to that?
I mean, I think we can build that into this. I think that's a piece of this, is building in that option. And if we can't do that, then I frankly wouldn't support it.
Right, but if it's a designation of like an open space
Exactly.
through like a trust, it may limit
What else we
some
can
of the
do.
things that, for example, that I had mentioned earlier.
I think it's part of the terms
That's
from
right,
her
yeah,
office.
right, that's
would
what
be
it-
who-
yes.
who- What other entity
Okay.
are we negotiating with, or are we partnering with? And what are what are the terms with that organization?
Okay.
So we can have that additional.
Okay, so Harold and I will follow up, I think,
Thank you.
and with this, okay,
I'm
sounds
sure
good.
this will be back on our agenda
Sure,
in June.
yeah.
Um,
If not sooner.
if not sooner.
Yeah.
I appreciate
Okay.
everyone coming. I know our teachers have been waiting for a long time to do
Yes.
our social studies textbook adoption, and I know board members probably want a break, but I was hoping we could have our
Yeah, we-
textbook
okay to go
adoption
through?
first, and then we'll go ahead and take a break.
That'd be great.
Because I appreciate your patience. I'm sorry. Sorry for the lengthy delay.
So we'll go ahead and start going with the social studies textbook adoption. And I will disconnect and actually have our Director of Curriculum and Instruction project. So, and I too want to also thank our staff members who are here.
Oh my gosh.
I know,
We lost about half.
I'm so sorry if we can just have the rest of the conversations move forward outside, please, that would be great. I don't think all of them are made it here, but I see some brave souls over there. So Geeti, I'm gonna go ahead and have you move without any further introduction. Geeti's on.
Well, good evening, thank you all. Yes, thank you to our teachers who have stayed this long. A few of them left, probably for the reason super excited to be able to talk about curriculum and being able to recommend a program to adopt. So to start off, wanted to talk a little bit about our timeline. Really, the timeline started last year, where we started to pilot, examine social studies curriculum and started our pilot. At the end of the year last year, we determined we needed more time and wanted to look at some new programs, which started out our year this year. In September through October, we started to kind of prepare ourselves for the pilot, created our pilot committee, met with the committee, looked at the rubric that we had created last year, wanted to make sure that it was still something that we wanted to use, made any adjustments that we needed to. And then we started phase 1 of our pilot, which was November through February. And that basically was, we piloted our first program. So one of the challenges that we ran up against last year was the limited time for our pilot. So we wanted to make sure we addressed that this year. Teachers got trained. There was asynchronous training that our first program offered, TCI. They did a thorough evaluation of the program through a lesson study. And then we transitioned into our second phase, which was February through April. And that's when we piloted Inquire Ed. Also received in-person training for this. And teachers also conducted a lesson study. In April, we had our consensus meeting where the team came together to determine which program we would like to bring forth for recommendation. And that's where we were today. Our pilot committee consisted of teachers from all grade levels across all of our sites. So we had Catherine Kelly, Lisa Carpenter, Vanessa Lamroche, Charles, and Vicki Hilty, Jennifer Kelly, Livia, Alex, Lauren, Trish Citrone, Mila, Kira, Annalisa, and Ali Pina. So we had pretty equal representation from all of our schools. And so we're happy that some of them had to take this long, so thank you all. I'm trying to get through some of this so that you guys can speak. So diving into kind of what our evaluation looked like of our curriculum, how we were going to evaluate our curriculum. So we developed a rubric last year, and by we I mean it was our TOSA team, curriculum, myself, and we utilized various resources. There were some resources through the County Office of Education, of course our standards and the framework, the FAIR Act, the social justice standards, and then we really looked at our Department of Education and what some of our local districts have done. So developing this rubric was important for us because it was very loud and clear that our current curriculum was not meeting our needs. And so we wanted to really create something that was what our teachers were looking for. And included criteria that was important for our staff. So that criteria was, we wanted to make sure that it was standards-based. It aligned, of course, with our standards and the framework. It was equitably and culturally responsive, exemplifies the social justice standards, has a wide range of perspectives, identities. It provided student and teacher support, so multimodal, having project opportunities, making sure there was teacher information, it's customizable. There were opportunities for formative and summative assessments and different types of assessments to determine what learning has been done. Making sure that it was students were engaged and really interested in the activities and the materials, and that there was an ease of implementation and making sure that any teacher sort of at any level of learning or background with social studies or comfort with social studies can kind of pick it up and just go. So these were kind of the areas that we felt were important for our teachers. And so using that, we then created our rubric. So the framework shifts, I just wanted to briefly talk about the standards. So the standards haven't changed since 1998, but the frameworks have shifted to focus on these 4 areas. Making sure the content is comprehensive and students have a very whole understanding of concepts and events. That there is inquiry within the curriculum, so making sure it's encouraging students to ask questions, to think critically, and actively engage with the content. That there is a literacy component, that it is emphasizing the development of reading, writing, listening, speaking, and that there's also a level of citizenship, making sure that it emphasizes the importance for students of their civic duties and responsibilities. So these were sort of the shifts that occurred, and these were some of the things that we were using as that guided our evaluation. So we started off, so teachers obviously piloted within their classrooms, and then they were also asked to do a deeper dive into a lesson or a unit. And so with both programs, initially we were only going to have the opportunity to deep dive into one unit with Inquire Ed, but eventually we did have the opportunity to kind of explore throughout the curriculum, but they were able to pick something other than what they piloted within their classroom. So these were based on those lesson studies. This was the averages of where the programs, what they scored. So this was kind of initially right off the bat. This was something that we shared, I shared during our consensus meeting with our teachers. to just kind of get a sense of where we were. So we wanted to kind of have a sense of where things were before we started our polls. So the next two slides are going to show you poll results from our consensus meeting. So during that consensus meeting, teachers reviewed their lesson studies. Some had not, they had done TCI. It had been a little bit of time, so we wanted to make sure they had an opportunity to kind of refresh their memory. They did some individual and group reflection, and then we conducted two polls. So the first poll, the difference between the first and the second is between those two, we had the opportunity to really dig deeper and have some conversations about the strengths and limitations of the program, what areas of support we would need, and so really had some robust conversations. So as you can see, that TCI kind of ranged between poll 1 and poll 2. There was some dropping of the support for TCI. And this was for a number of different reasons, but again, it was through our conversations of the strengths and the limitations. The next poll is showing the same for Inquire Ed. So the blue is the first poll and the red is the second. So as you can see, the support for the Inquire Ed program was pretty strong to start with. And then it just felt like it really tipped it over for some folks. So some of the strengths that teachers shared about the program, and I won't read all of this, there's a lot of words on these slides, and we have some of our folks standing, so I may ask them to share also, but that it truly they felt like truly had some really good teaching practices, such as inquiry is fully embedded, it is in the title. Right? And so fully embedded, lots of collaboration and projects. They felt that this was the first curriculum that cross-curricular activities felt natural and not forced. So often as teachers, we are asked, and we ask our teachers to well, you can include writing into that. You can include, math into that. But this actually felt that happened naturally. So there were components, and I think our teachers can talk about it, where they were annotating text. It's part of the curriculum. They are looking for main idea. And let's see, there was an increased student engagement and participation, which was very evident during my observations as well. It also inspires students to look for a way to see what they could do around their community. So the culminating project is typically something that you are doing for your community. And it provided students skills beyond the content. And so I wanted to take a moment to see if any of our teachers would like to share anything specific about the strengths of Inquire Ed. We'll jump into limitations.
I was going to say something really quick because I know it's getting late. 2 weeks ago, I had to go back to our current social studies adoption, and my kids said, "What are you doing? What happened in Inquire Ed? Like, we like that." And it was because the activities to them felt fun. In the past, when knowing about your location, it'd say, think about a bird's eye view of the classroom. Now make a sketch of the classroom. And the kids were like, "Oh my gosh." In Inquire Ed, it said, make a treasure map. Hide something in the classroom, then swap your map, and you have to find it. And the kids were like, "A treasure map? So cool."
Yeah.
Can we do another one? And then, we swapped the maps and the kids were looking for their treasure and there was cheering and it was just celebration of a curriculum. And it was very exciting. Another one was when we were talking about, bringing in math and bringing other things. One lesson was on pay equity. So they had a video on Billie Jean King and there was a read aloud to go with it. And the kids were like, "Oh my gosh, is she still alive?" And I said, "This isn't that long ago, my friend." And then we were talking about the equity, and we were like, one of those, I saw something about the women's soccer league,
that they don't make as much money as the men. Why is that? And then there was debate, and they wanted to know how much they're paid now and how much they paid the men's soccer league. And then they were like, that's ridiculous. Can I write an opinion piece about that? We were doing opinion writing. And then it was just incredible. And then she had mentioned, you know, that, and this was during Women's History Month, you know, can you believe that during Women's History Month? And I said, well, this is all the time. I'm not just paying us during Women's History Month. But just, it brought it alive, and it touched upon current events, current issues of our time. And the kids went home, the parents were like, wow, you teach that in first grade? Amazing. Go kids. Tackle the world. Make sure women make the same as men do. Make it happen. And then my kids were like, can I write to my legislator? You know, so it's just so incredible. It just brought it alive. And the thing I love about Inquire Ed is it's online and it can be updated anytime. So we have adoptions for about 8-9 years, but this can be adopted on the fly by the company. We can tell them what our needs are, and then they'll say, oh, you know, you got to upload because, you know, we've added some things to the program. So it's not going to be something that's the same for the next 9 years. It can change and evolve to meet the needs of our district and other districts that adopt it. So I have so much more to say, but I have my esteemed colleagues here been waiting all night. So go ahead.
Well, just kind of building on what Charles said. Olivia Brown, I teach at grade out Wagner Range. Hi. It's called Inquire Ed. Units are called inquiries. So it's an inquiry-based curriculum, which means that it's really student-driven. And just like Charles' student, my third graders were, you know, all the units start, they launch with a QFT, which is a question formulation technique, and the kids are asked to write down as many questions as they have. And it's really hard for them at first because they're like, well, what do you want us to ask? I said, anything you want. And there's no questions that are off limits. And so they start asking questions, and you can just see as they go, the questions get more and more involved. And because it's an inquiry-based lesson, they actually have the ability to create their final unit assessment. And so what my students are doing after CAST testing is we are going to be creating their own journey of figuring out cultural deep dive into different cultures, kind of going off of what we've learned this whole time. And they get to choose if it's 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional, Google Slides. So they're really excited, and they get really excited about just the exploration of it all. So the inquiry part of it is super exciting for them because they're not very often told to ask questions and then, you know, really encouraged to ask more questions on top of that question. Like I think Vicki Hilty, who's here and she had to leave, she mentioned during our wrap-up meeting that one of the best things is, you know, the lesson's going this way, but then there's one part that leads kind of away. And that's the best part of teaching is where all of a sudden, well, this isn't exactly what we're talking about, but yeah, let's look into the Statue of Liberty and let's look at this. And you kind of go on all these deep dives and, you know, those are the things that they remember. So it's very exciting. I love it.
Jennifer Kelly at second grade at Sleepy Hollow. Yeah, just the excitement that the kids had at their level of engagement. It provided a good structure and framework, but they could really personalize it. And as a teacher, you can customize it, and they're customizing it for themselves. And like ours, I think they were really excited too because it was on innovators and inventions and innovation, excuse me. And they, coinciding with our STEAM Expo, they were just like amazed at all of these things that were happening. And we created this timeline and they added things to it. They learned about the inventors and innovations and went home, had those discussions and how things, you know, comparing things to how they were for their parents and grandparents and coming in and saying, my grandfather or my ancestor invented this machine that did this and it never happened before. And so the other kids, of course, then went home and saying, what is our family accomplished? The other thing that really set for them, you know, just we're always telling them, don't get stuck, keep trying. I mean, just to see the inventors that how many times they had to try and try and try. And change and make adjustments. And, you know, it was just that whole process. And they were like, that's what we're doing. We're trying. And I said, yeah. And they're like, and then some people kept doing all this work and they didn't get to what they wanted, but they created this other really cool thing. And so that enthusiasm and wanting to apply it to other things too was great.
I was also going to say there's a real ease of use. It's online, and you know, where some teachers say, "Oh my gosh, online," but we have the 95% phonics program we adopted. It's online, and we've really used that. It's been real easy to use it. The other thing I like is they have slides, so you can go through those slides, and it connects to read alouds, and it connects to videos, and it was more age appropriate. Like I noticed with the read aloud books and the videos, they were really geared towards the age group that you're teaching. With the other programs, you have to really be careful and watch them first and make sure that it's going to be age appropriate. And this one, the group that did the research, they really were good at making sure that everything was truly age appropriate. So I appreciated that. And a lot of the read alouds we already have because we purchased read aloud books school-wide. And I recognized some of the titles I had in my library that were already purchased for me by my site administrator. So that to me was great, just knowing that we have a lot of the resources already. That'll be a savings for us because we don't have to purchase what we already have. So I just want to say thank you too, because the deeper dive that we did with both programs was really smart to do, as it just forced us to go, okay, we really need to do everything for this unit. And at the end with the program that we really liked, it's like, look at what else is out there. And they allowed us to maintain the licensing longer just so that we can look at other modules. So I went through them with my kids and I said, look at this, look at this, and look at this. And they were just super excited. So I really appreciate your leadership, all the timely feedback and letting us know, you know, what we're going to be doing and when, and you're going to come by and observe lessons. Like she was in my room several times and got to see our kids and how engaged they were. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Any board members have questions?
Was Geeti finishing the presentation or?
I have a few more.
Oh, okay.
Just a few more.
Okay.
Thank you. There, you know, like any curricular program, there are some limitations. And so we talk a little bit about the limitations here. Some of the topics and vocabulary was a little bit higher than what the students could comprehend. All of the materials are online, and so there is a component of prepping that ahead of time, having printouts and copies and things like that available. Also, some of the vocabulary words, some of the images are beautiful and very well done, but teachers would love to have those on cardstock and laminated and things of that nature. So there were some limitations with that. There were instances, I think, as Jennifer Olivia, I think, alluded to, which was you may have to stop as a teacher yourself and learn about a specific topic. As Vicki Hilty's class kind of went off on Statue of Liberty. And so then being able to dive deeper into those other topics that you may not have a lot of information. Another piece that did come up was the differentiation and being able to support for some of the struggling readers and how we can provide support for that. And we do talk a little bit about how we can address that in a few slides. Okay, so just diving a little bit deeper into Inquire Ed. So these are the units that are offered for each grade level. Every grade level has 3 inquiries, excuse me, and except for 5th grade, which has 4. So again, a very broad, lots of words. I won't read through all of this information, but I just wanted to highlight a few notes on here. So the curriculum utilizes diverse and complex text. There's thousands of videos, text, maps, and photographs. The projects that culminate are based on real world impactful projects, how we can impact our community. There are multiple options for book choices that Charles spoke of, allowing for that customization and differentiation. And then there is a toolbox component where there is a resource guide that helps with the differentiation and how teachers can differentiate within the lesson. So, and then it is open-ended. And I think during our consensus meeting, and you, Olivia, that mentioned how it is repetitive. And I think in kind of my understanding of the program, it's repetitive for a reason, to offer that opportunity for differentiating and being able to reteach and providing those scaffolding opportunities. And there are multiple perspectives on how historical events and periods have impacted certain groups. The readings and the videos where people of color and other diverse communities can tell their story and how they have shaped history. And as Charles said, the curriculum can continuously be updated to reflect new voices and respond to shifts and perspectives. So some implementation considerations as we consider adoption, these are going to be important to keep in mind. So professional development, it is very different than our current curriculum, right? It is inquiry-based. So there is going to have to be some specific professional development around what that looks like. So an overview, we really want to, since there was a focus on the differentiation, that was a limitation that our teachers had expressed. We want to make sure to provide them some professional development around that. And then that question formulation technique that was mentioned, the QFT protocol, is tricky and challenging. And so we want to make sure we can provide some PD and training on how to do that with a classroom of first graders or fifth graders, right? So those are going to look very different in those classes, and really making sure to support teachers in creating an inquiry-based classroom. There were a few pieces that were lacking in our grade 3 and grade 4 curriculum. So grade 4 is currently being revamped. We had a 4th grade curriculum that our teachers had an opportunity to look at that was not based on in California. And so they, Inquire Ed met with our 4th grade teachers, took their feedback. They were developing curriculum based on the feedback we've provided, along with our local neighboring district, Walnut Creek, has also adopted, as well as Alameda. And so they were taking that feedback to be able to create a 4th grade curriculum that encompasses California history. The anticipated date for that to be available is November of 2025. So they do have, this year, November of 2024.
That was one of my questions, actually.
Yes.
Thank you.
I saw everyone's face. I was like, wait, that's not right. I apologize. That's a typo. So 2025. However, from just talking to Walnut Creek and neighboring districts, there are aspects of the 4th grade curriculum within the current curriculum that they've offered that teachers can do before they kind of get into the California history aspect. Also, grade 3 was missing on some of the local community and local history aspect. And so there is going to be some updating that's also going to happen with 3rd grade. The other piece that's really that is a strength for the program is that there are ways where teachers, and we've done some of this work already, where we've created supplemental lessons. If there is a supplemental lessons that have been created for 3rd grade, we can upload that into the Inquire Ed database, and then that's available to all teachers. So then it becomes our kind of part of our core curriculum rather than kind of the inconsistent way that it's been sometimes done. And then also the material piece of it. So Inquire Ed does offer the option to purchase the printed materials. And so we have talked about offering that at least for the first year, for teachers to have all of the curriculum in their hands. And then we can determine whether or not we want to continue with that. So then our next steps would be to have it available for community preview and feedback, starting as soon as possible until our next board meeting. We have computers and feedback forms at all of our elementary schools that will be available. And then the hope is that we'll come back to our June 3rd Board of Trustees meeting for hopefully approval. So, thank you. At this time, we're open for questions and or if our teachers want to share anything else they want to about the experience, just going through the pilot or anything else that you want to.
I think we should go to board questions.
Sure, I'll start. Just a couple of quick questions. I know you presented also at the Equity Steering Committee meeting last week, and I just kind of wanted to raise some of the questions that were raised there just for the board's sake as well. Just in terms of, there's been questions about, our history and what's in our lessons. And there were some questions from members of that committee about, how this new material differs from what we currently have. And just wondering if there's a way to kind of highlight some of those specific areas as well. I mean, I know it's going to be available to the public, but I think if we could call out some of those things, I think that would be helpful to members of the community as they're reviewing it. So maybe that's not really a question. Maybe it's more just a request.
Action item.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Many of the videos and the interviews that they had were actual people that lived during that time, that are still alive or that they captured.
Like
on
primary
video.
sources?
Okay.
Primary sources.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess my point is just to be able to highlight that for, members that have had questions.
So would it be maybe almost like a table of contents? So if somebody's going out and previewing it, they could actually see what they're looking for?
Yeah, I think that would be helpful
Something
to
like that,
people that have had questions.
as opposed to just them going through all the videos.
Here it is, yes.
Sure.
There was definitely a lot of tell your story. So it comes authentically from the child and the stories they heard from their family. And so that came into the room. And so there was a lot of that prompting, tell us about, yourself, your family, your ancestors. So it was bringing in living history.
That's great.
So hearing from the student, I think that's really important.
So in my class, we actually had a really great opportunity. We're talking about culture and how do we respect and honor other people's cultures with an emphasis on immigrants and people who come to the United States, push and pull factors. And one of the things that we did was we analyzed a few different immigration stories that the curriculum provided us. And the way that it was written was super accessible. And we ended up sending it home to one of my students who actually came from Ukraine 2 years ago when the war started, and his mom was able to kind of copy the formulation of what the curriculum provided. And so my class actually got to do a class study on his immigration story and the push and pull for that. And it was really great for them to kind of be able to understand, they're leaving from a country with a lot of war, but there's still so much of their culture and their home life that was really, really great and is really, really great and that they miss and that we're able to incorporate here with the foods they eat and the things we do in our classroom. So that's kind of an example of how we are able to really embed this curriculum within our classrooms as well.
And I was going to say, I have a student from Israel, and it was just so perfect because we were talking, not that we were focused on immigration, but the fact that he came from Israel came into a discussion, and he just felt so included, and that his story could be told, and his family could come in. It was such a beautiful moment, and he said to me later, I really appreciate that I'm a part of the history program. And so I think that's so valuable for a child, their story to be known and that opportunity to be there in the program. So thank you.
I just had one other question unrelated to that. In the limitations for the program, one of the things that was noted was differentiation needs more support for struggling readers. I just wanted to get kind of an understanding of what your recommendation would be to ensure that, we can achieve that for our struggling readers and what you would recommend. Whoever would like to be.
That was really important to me, right? I have a few readers. And so we used our RAS, which we have through the district, RAS readers, AC reading. So we found some books through that, also through Epic that we have access to as well. And so we were able to, look together and find text that's appropriate. And that was something the student did, together with us. That didn't mean they couldn't look at the text that was more challenging, but for a deeper understanding at their reading level, we made that available. So I think that, doing that with your student is helpful. Like, let's look at this text. How's that feel to you? And then sometimes they're like, I think I can take on a little bit more challenging text as the months go by and revisit something that they learned early in the year and have less access. So that was helpful.
Yeah, I think the other piece, we wanted to make sure to provide specific professional development around differentiation. So they have a series just on differentiation. I think the other component with the way the curriculum is, it is very repetitive. And so there are opportunities to customize it. And there are additional ways that teachers can customize the lessons. I think that a piece of this will be just being able to explore and really kind of go through the entire curriculum to be able to figure out where can I adjust and where can I kind of modify for my students. And to note, the QFT protocol was very new for our teachers. And so I think as they get more comfortable with just kind of the way that inquiries are conducted, I think the differentiation piece will be addressed. But we did want to kind of dig into having that specific PD from Inquire Ed around it.
Thank you.
I just have a couple. First of all, thank you for sticking around so late. Really,
Yeah,
really
thank you.
appreciate it. The presentation was very comprehensive, and knowing that three of you and other teachers totally got into this, and this is your strong recommendation, I appreciate that you're the one doing the work. So that adds a ton of value to my choice about adoption. A couple of questions. One is there was a note that there was significant time to the lesson planning because you wanted things laminated and card stacks, et cetera. Is that the kind of thing where, like, if you do it the first year, then you file away for next year and potentially you have less load the next year?
Yes.
Okay. And then there was mention of printed materials possibly being purchased in the first year. Teachers, do you feel like that would be worth it? Are we talking about like a giant TE that you can look through, or is it changing so often that we'd be purchasing materials for year one and then you'd be like, I don't need that anymore?
I mean, some books are saying like a shared T amongst the grade level.
Okay,
which
yeah,
is great.
that's a good idea.
Would be helpful.
We each need one, we can have a shared T.
Okay. Okay.
And to those, TE is a teacher edition.
Sorry. Yes, with all your lessons in it.
Those that are watching.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I guess the last comment when it comes to differentiation and the mentioned like vocabulary, that was a little challenging, or maybe they saw it another year. Actually, I really like that. I think that social studies, history, that kind of area really allows for some vocabulary development. So that actually seemed like a positive to me.
And they had a vocabulary you could print out, and it gave the definition, had a picture, at least for first grade. So we had that available for the kids to see at any time. We would review those. So for that, the language that was difficult, we made it accessible by reviewing it and keeping it in the classroom.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, I didn't have a lot of questions, but I did actually get access to the content, so thank you for that. And I think I totally see what you all were talking about. Like, it actually took me a while to find where the actual content was, because I knew it was about the questions, which was also great. And I can imagine how engaging that is in the classroom. And then actually overall, I have to say, for the software we've seen, this is actually really well designed. I was just probably slow to figure out how to dig deep enough. So like, here it is. But then as I went into like poking around in like the Revolutionary War content for the fifth graders, just want to in actually like the types of things they're talking about and cause and effect. Like, I don't think I studied in high school. So, it was one of my concerns was, is there going to be enough? The questioning is great, but if you have a base of the core information, you really just want the kids to be able to, kind of pick up each year. And it does, I'm sure each year will get changed around, but it does feel like that is also included here. So also great to see the enthusiasm of the teachers, because
It really honors kids' curiosity. The whole questioning technique is, we don't want to tell them what they should think. We're going to give them a foundation of things that they should learn. but then honoring that they're curious about things, maybe things we haven't thought of, and understanding everybody has different curiosities, and you can explore those. And they can have time during reading time to explore their topics. So that was really exciting to me, that it honors kids' curiosity.
Yeah, and that was, and I like how you said that, because I feel like it is a balance of you want to teach them how to think and how to question, but you also want to give them some base information to kind of work from, and then the rest of please imagine.
I was pleasantly surprised with it being all online. It's like,
yeah.
I actually thought it was really easy to use, like you said. I think it's one of the better programs I've seen online.
Yeah.
And I appreciated it wasn't just a little reader that they had to write a specific response to. You're like, no, that's not what it says. Go back, it was stuff that they were generating, but with a relevance to the topic.
We broke out the workbook. We were like, no!
I actually brought my students QFTs and I just realized I didn't black out their names, so I'm just gonna like put a little chipper. But they're really good. But they're really good. I mean, it starts like this is the top of it is what do people eat in America? And then the last one goes, what did people wear when they came to America? So just as it goes on, things just get more and more detailed and questioned. Into the, like one of them was, how many different cultures are there? How many different languages are there? How did language become developed? It's
a big question.
Yeah, it's just different
Wow.
layers.
That escalated.
It's really cool to see. Yes.
And so I really appreciate all the hard work and the enthusiasm. It's wonderful to see after, seeing all the current adoption a few years ago. So thank you for being here so late and for sharing. And for those teachers who aren't here as well, so I had to leave. I love to hear that the curriculum is challenging the students to have strategic thought and analytical reasoning. I think that is key and so critical to, making sure that they have sustained learning and are just forward thinking. So I love that. I love the inquiries and the, what is it, QTFs? That's awesome. And I love that there's student voice within the curriculum. That is wonderful to hear. And that all the students at each of the grades that you represent really enjoyed it and were vocal about that. I think that's so important that they shared that. I have questions around the supplementary materials, like what is possible. And then I know you were talking about immigration. And so how does the curriculum handle, we talked about this, as Hillary mentioned, in the steering committee last week, but how does the curriculum handle sensitive topics like slavery or colonialism? Does it provide a balanced perspective that acknowledges the struggles of different groups without placing, shame? Can you share?
Yeah, I mean, so when I spoke to our fifth grade teachers, because that's kind of when that is being taught, and they definitely saw the difference. I mean, again, I think kind of piggybacking off of what's already been said is there are multiple perspectives, there are different voices that are being shared in those primary sources, and so it is being the curriculum is being shared in a way that is respectful to all groups, but also not necessarily minimizing the challenges and the struggles that existed. So fifth grade teachers weren't able to attend this evening, but they did share that they see it's very different from the current curriculum and gives them a good foundation because I think they have wanted to find a way to teach curriculum in a way that is inclusive of multiple perspectives, and they just didn't have the foundation sometimes, and they felt like they had some really good resources to be able to use in this program.
Thanks, I appreciate that. And then for the preview, I know this is a question that came up last week. Will you have the printed materials and the online laptop available for those who want to look at it? Because it's pretty cool platform, but then I know some people may want to look at the printed materials as well.
So they only provided us a catalog, and the catalog is pretty thorough, so we'll leave a catalog available. And then I think based on just the feedback today is I'll kind of create a how-to, right, to navigate the site because it can take a little bit of time to get used to, so I'll kind of create that and put that with it. But they only included a catalog. Like I said, it's pretty thorough, but
we can go through and try to print some of them, but it is,
It's a lot.
yeah, so it's hard to.
But we'll be able to get online and actually
I
look
think
at.
we've shared the access with all board members, I believe.
Yeah, so board members all have access, and then there will be a Chromebook set up at the school sites that are gonna have the same access you guys have. And then I'll just create some directions. And then there's a QR code and a bit.ly link to be able to provide feedback.
And the printed material's all there, it's all accessible. What we're saying is like being the unit, you would have it all in one package, you just go through and see, what's there, rather than click and finding it all, but it's all there. So when you go online, you can just easily click on a printout you're gonna use.
That's great. It's wonderful.
One more question, sorry. About assessment, I don't feel like I heard about that in the presentation too much. What does the curriculum provide in terms of assessment?
Yeah, formative and summative, and then all of it's editable too, which is a big plus for teachers as well. Based on, like we said, it's repetitive and cyclical a bit as we go through the modules. So if we, for time's sake, need to, change some things up, we can go in and edit assessments based off of that, which is really helpful.
Are the assessments more, I know because of the nature of the program, it seems like the assessment might be more asking open-ended questions versus factual,
Versus
like a rote memory. It sounds, but, and that's reflected on the assessments then? Yeah.
Their knowledge.
Yeah, thank you. No, I think that's an important component, obviously, so that you have learned some information as well in your study of history. So thank you. That's what I was getting at.
One example that I gave, you had to have 4 components to try to map. You have a compass rose, you're gonna have a map key. It's gonna look like the classroom from a bird's eye view. So there were elements they had to have on the map. So you would look at that as part of the assessment.
Yeah, okay.
So it's taking a product that they created and making sure that they have those
There's
components.
specific objectives here that you're going
That was so much better than multiple choice.
This is a discussion item. We don't have any public comment, given the time of night. We'll just thank our teachers so much for coming to the presentation, and look forward to having the opportunity to go through the materials ourselves, and we'll come back June 3rd.
Yeah, so we would bring this back in June for an official action item.
Mika, can we very quickly go over the quarterly update for the legal services?
Yes, this is the legal expense as of March 31st. So it's 120 as of March 31st. Compared to last year, it's 50,000 less. So I'm hoping we will finish with 200 or less than 200 that we kind of need the legal expense you never know. So this is the report.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mika.
Yes, thank you. There's no public comment. Any questions?
Yeah.
How are we doing? Do we need a 5-minute break, or should we do the measures E&I implementation and just power
We
through?
have a couple gentlemen that have been
Been waiting a long time. I really appreciate you being here and waiting so
We've
long.
lost some, yes.
So our first item is the contract approval for the Wagner Ranch Path of Travel Upgrades Project.
Sure.
You can do this.
You're all on. Yeah, it's on you.
Do this one.
Wake up.
The Wagner Ranch Elementary Modernization Project was previously approved by the Board of Trustees and has since been approved by the Division of State Architecture. The accessibility path of travel portion of this modernization project is being bid separately from the overall project in order to have it completed by the end of the summer 2024, which will allow us to close out another project that has scope kind of overlapping on it. We had 2 job walks on it. We had, I think, 5 contractors, if I remember right, show up. 3 of them actually bid the project. We would be happy with any of the 3, actually. They were all good bids. But we are recommending and asking approval to enter into a contract for Michael G. McKim Company, the lowest responsible bidder.
Another question, is there any reason not to take the lowest bidder?
Like I said, we'd be happy with any of these 3 contractors. The bids all look good.
We have references and
Because there was a bidder that was lower just by like $2,000 or something.
It's right on here. Our estimate was 250,000. So the lowest responsible bidder is 246,675.
Well, I
Sorry.
I just
Yes.
numbers in my, that vision. Sorry. Thank you.
It's right there.
That's okay.
Wait, I can hear you.
Anyone else have any questions on this contract? There's no public comment. Would someone like to make a motion?
Hillary, I move that we approve a contract with Michael G. McKim Company for the OUSD Wagner Ranch Path of Travel Upgrades Project.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, the motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have the Inspector of Record Services for Wagner Ranch for the Path of Travel Upgrades Project.
Actually, as part of that project, we might. So, the nice thing about this project is there's not a lot of special inspections or anything. The Inspector of Record should be able to handle most, if not all, of the inspections required for this project. It's the same inspector that's tied to the one that we're closing out. So we're trying to get an economy of scales here. So we're asking that you approve the proposal for this Inspector of Record. It would be a CIS, the name of the company for the Inspector of Record.
It's like a necessary piece of the puzzle.
You can do it without them.
Anyone have any questions? Is there a motion?
This is Eve. I move that we approve the proposal from CIS for the Inspector of Record Services required for the Wagner Ridge Miss Path of Travel Upgrades Project.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Motion carries. Next, we're on to C, the contract approval for pre-construction services for district-wide modernization.
This is one that I'm going to ask our staff to come up.
Patience, Swinnerton.
Over this one. This is Vincent Psalm. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Are you tired? Nice to see you too.
So we put out an RFP for our pre-qualified pool of leaseback contractors for the remainder of the modernization projects at all 5 campuses. Of the pre-qualified pool of 4 contractors, 3 showed up for the mandatory sidewalks. They were Rodan, Obra, and Lathrop. Of the 3 of them, Rodan was the only responsive bidder putting out a bid for this project. Despite that, during our evaluation of their proposal and during the bid interviews, we found that their presentation and their preparedness for the project to be quite impressive. Actually, they had gone forth and done a considerable amount of due diligence and proceeded to actually begin to bid parts of the project in good faith to secure better pricing should they be awarded the contract. And as well, because of their due diligence, we're able to put forth a preliminary schedule outlining the scope of work for pretty much the next to completion of the project. So we knew roughly what parts of what campus they'd be working on in each month of each summer for the entirety of the project. So the amount of detail and effort they put into that presentation made them despite being the only responsive bidder, a very impressive presentation nonetheless. So in our opinion, after evaluating their proposal and their pricing, not only was their pricing for the pre-construction portion of the proposal significantly below what we expected from market, the leaseback financing portion was about a point below market as well. So that would save the district about 1% on interest on the lease payments. We had nothing, because it's a pre-qualified bid, nothing precludes the district from selecting the contractor despite only having 1 bid. So based on all that,
I was going to say, maybe you can talk to part of the interview process as well that kind of put us in the position of feeling more comfortable with them, the questions that we're asking.
Oh, yes.
As far as their own manpower was a big plus as well for the type of work that's being done.
yes. So part of their due diligence was when they had put out bids for parts of the project, they had received multiple bids for portions of the work. And lessons learned from previous work with the district, they did manage, instead of putting a lot of work into one subcontractor and then being stuck with them, they were actually able to spread the work out across several subcontractors, which gives them the option where if one subcontractor is underperforming at any point in time in the project, they can be let go and replaced with another, or one can be given more work down the road, should they perform better as the workload somewhat changes throughout the summers. So it gives them more flexibility, as well as having a larger pool of labor to pull from. So if, one group is underperforming, there is another contractor that could bring more labor into the project as well to make up for that time.
Each site was going to have its individual superintendent.
Yep. So there would
monitoring.
be, previously for the HVAC and electrical project, there was only one superintendent per group of schools, but this one is set up so that each site will have its own superintendent with a overall project superintendent overseeing them. So there will be somebody on site at each school during the work to ensure that all the trades are working in concert with each other and making sure that the schedules are kept on time.
It sounds like they've learned some lessons from.
There's quite a bit of, which is another advantage to having somebody who's previously worked in the district.
Right.
They understand the school, they're already familiar. We will be working with some of the same individuals from the last project team. So they're already familiar with the staff and the procedures and policies of the district. And they already understand, part of what makes us confident in the pricing is they already understand what's behind some of the walls because they've already cut into some of them. So it's another issue when working with a contractor who's never been inside the walls before. They just throw a price at it and hope for the best. But they already know. So we're quite confident in them.
Most of the carpentry work would be done in-house as well, which is a plus. That is a big part of the project, and they wouldn't be contracting that out. They have a sizable amount of manpower that they